When Haruka strolls in the forest at night, when everything is as dark as your mother's steak, he treads on a twig in the same manner that your father does on a twink each night. The ugly-ass goblins all gaze in his direction and lose focus due to the fire they ignited, despite the tiny sound it made. Naturally, being goblins, they all rush towards him in an attempt to capture him and prepare him for a tasty cannibalistic feast. However, he moves as quickly as the majority of you do in bed, like a flash, leaving you gals so dissatisfied that they come to me. They follow after him, but he leaps when they get to a particular distance. That's because, I know this is kind of harsh, he dug a hole in the earth that was as deep as your neighbor's when he dug it in your mother when you weren't there. Because they didn't know about the trap he made, all of the goblins tumbled into that pit. Having just avoided being roasted like a bird, he is relieved that he dug that pit. The sun is rising when he removes his veil and considers how he is still making his way through a different reality. Let's take a brief look back to establish some context. He tells the story of how he entered this planet by transit. Like he usually did, he was reading during lunch on this typical school afternoon. Yes, he's a complete recluse who presumably spends his time reading or playing video games. He believes he's superior to everyone else, but that simply makes him a brain rot. That's the only reason I'm here, so I guess that makes sense for all of you weebs. Anyway, he tells the story of why he's alone, seeming like he's trying to explain himself, saying that it's because he didn't want anything to do with his peers. Haruka goes on to remark that the delinquents, the Valley Gals set, the jocks, the geeks, the class representatives, and the rest of them are merely there if he had to divide the class into any categories. NPCs, goddamn them. He is, after all, an NPC, but his conceit must be too great to allow that. Now let's get back to the real tale of how he was transported. The magic circle that Haruka had read about in the book materialized as he rested his head on the desk. Everyone in the class, including the jocks and the masculine men, began to worry extremely badly. They all behaved precisely like gay men or K-pop idols would. Our main character approached the door and tried to open it to flee, but the door would not even slightly budge. Climbing the ceiling was his only viable escape route. In the hopes of being spared, he climbs the ceiling, but the magic circle reaches out to him as well, and he soon finds himself in a completely white area. There is nobody else there but him, the child realizes as he glances about. Rather, he discovers an elderly guide who appears to be in a state of panic and who was formerly considered a god in this location. It turns out that Haruka is the only student still to be transported, while the rest of the class has already been transported to the other planet. The word transported gives me the impression that I'm telling the story of an illegal people transporting documentary. He had to configure his isekai stats and other things because the elderly man had instructed him to hurry. Then a large screen materializes in front of him. Ordinarily, everyone receives 50 points to utilize at the beginning. But this was the elderly man's first time transporting 43 people at once, so the stat board had a first-come, first-serve thing going on. Well, since he was pretty late, the only skills left were super crap ones, and he really did not want to have some leftover crap. So he throws a tantrum and starts to shake the old man back and forth, and the old man gives him all the leftover skills after getting annoyed, and he gets transported to this new place. Well, yay, sort of a win I would say, since he got multiple skills, just all the crap ones. My dude is left shocked as he sees the place he got transported to. It was a forest. He has no clue what to do and how to handle things further, so he picks up the bag he got and sees that the bag can hold infinite items. I bet it still won't be able to handle your McDonald's eating ass, so try going to the gym to lose some weight. The items inside were kinda crap, but it is what it is, he gotta live with it. Then, Haruka checks his stats and wears the stuff he got in the bag, and then gets on his way to form a party, or just build a home for himself for now, and he seems pretty motivated. Though it's kind of difficult to see in the woods, he chooses to try on the lenses he received and discovers that they actually allow him to see everything, including the attributes and energy levels of other objects as clearly as day. In essence, he gained the ability to appraise things with those lenses, and as a result, he is able to gather food and drink since he is aware of what can be toxic and what he can consume without running into God again. He locates a brook, fills up on water, and retrieves more for later. He then chooses to enter the cave after seeing it, despite his fears that it may be home to monsters or that he may be severely burned. Having manners, he knocks but gets no answer. He realizes that it's empty. Anyways, he walks in and decides to settle in with the stuff he got in the bag. He puts up the tent and uses his temperature magic skill to light up a fire. With that done, he falls asleep and gets through the night. His first day in another world as a loner was a success. Now he has to do something that is a woman's job, cooking. Because, well, he is still bitchless, and he gotta cook for himself, so he makes some food with the stuff he collected, and after he's done eating, he goes outside to see what more he can do to survive in this world. As he is collecting stuff for the temporary residence he decided on, the cave, he hears the bushes rustling. So he takes a peek and sees some goblins, which of course scare him. He checks their stats and wonders what he should do, realizing that he has to fight them someday, so he needs to start practicing right away. That is so manly. I don't quite know why he's so bitchless. So he goes and attacks the goblins and slays them using a stick with his magic, and just like that, he wins his first battle ever. After a while, the evening falls and he goes to the stream, washes his face, and feels proud of the great kills he made today. He goes back to the cave and gobbles down the mushrooms he collected. While returning from the fight, he also brought back one of the sticks of the goblins, which is just as useless as your father's reproductive organ. Then he checks his stats and gets happy over the fact that his stats literally doubled and he's on level 2 now. He gets happy like a baby knowing that he literally just used his stick to do that. Well, I used my stick to make your mama delay her periods for 9 months, nothing big in it. While still in the cave, he realizes he gotta work more on his calisthenics so he doesn't get captured by the goblins and get beat up. The next day, he is quite tired of the mushrooms he's been eating and he could use some meat. Anyway, he thinks about how the class rep would not approve of it and eats all his mushrooms super quick because he knows he has to keep his strength up. His appraisal skill got a boost too, but he finds it sort of confusing because he was used to it being the way it was. In any case, he goes outside to practice his enhanced and newly learned magic abilities. He runs faster than before and leaps from one spot to another. The youngster does not appear to be missing anything from his previous life, and he is clearly quite anxious to try out his new abilities. He shrugs off the thought of eating a mushroom because he has been eating only that for the past 3 days and feels like he could throw up at the mere thought. He starts looking for meat the way a drug dealer looks for his 1 gram of dropped pot. He hears rustles while he is suddenly experimenting with his new abilities, and sure enough, it's goblins. But these ones are stronger. However, he kills 2 of them and questions whether he could have eliminated the remaining 3 because he is more stronger now than he was before. God certainly works in odd ways, for immediately 3 more goblins appear, but since he isn't very skilled at this point, he chooses to hide. He's concentrating on his practice when he notices a rabbit, and his eyes dart out, craving meat. His mouth is watering in the same manner that a woman's mouth waters at the sight of a 6'5", blue-eyed trust fund man in finance. So he catches the rabbit right away, and he begins to make his way back to the cave when he hears some noise and sees some shadows, which surely weren't goblins. Using his assessment abilities, he determines that it was his classmates who were all loitering in groups. He makes the decision to hide from them since he truly doesn't want to be teased by them. When he notices the class representative, his heart skips a beat, and he tells himself to go talk to her. Once a loner though, always a loner. He kills himself because at last he feels free to exist in this world and not have to rely on others to guide him. Even though he has known the class representative since he was a young child, he decides to stop himself since that gives him a strong, powerful feeling. They appear to have grown up as classmates although still being loners, and probably have social anxiety, which is why he is giving excuses, or maybe he just really likes his freedom, which Americans think they have too. But seriously, y'all gotta wake up because it's just not the North Koreans who are the enslaved ones. So this man chooses his freedom over the chances of losing his virginity, which any sane man would never do. Maybe it's just the late night hours that are making me think like that, but I'm pretty sure Andrew Tate would approve of Haruka choosing to stay strong and not bending down to get laid. As the delinquents approached, one of them squinted, convinced he'd heard a rustle in the bushes nearby. With a swagger that practically screamed, "I'm definitely up to no good," he crept closer to investigate. Haruka's heart raced as he held his breath, hoping they wouldn't discover his hiding spot. When the delinquent pushed aside the leaves, all he found was a confused bunny, twitching its nose as if contemplating life's greatest mysteries. The delinquents exchanged baffled looks, shrugged it off, and ambled away, leaving Haruka both relieved and slightly embarrassed for the poor rabbit. Curiosity got the better of him, so he decided to follow the delinquents. Surely they were up to something juicy, maybe even plotting a grand scheme of rebellion. As he trailed behind, he strained to listen, fully expecting to overhear some riveting conversation. Instead, he found himself subjected to a surprisingly detailed analysis of their class VP's chest. It was baffling how seriously they discussed it, as if it were a topic worthy of an academic dissertation. Haruka facepalmed internally, realizing he'd risked being caught by delinquents for this nonsense. Where was the intrigue? The strategic planning? Instead, he felt like he was eavesdropping on a bunch of high school philosophers in the midst of a rather ridiculous debate. Despite the absurdity, he couldn't shake the worry gnawing at him. Without any rules to rein them in, who knew what trouble these guys might stir up? Haruka imagined all sorts of chaotic scenarios, sneaky pranks, wild escapades, or perhaps a spontaneous karaoke showdown. But then he remembered the class rep, the fearless leader with a talent for shutting down shenanigans faster than a lightning bolt. She always managed to intervene just in time, ready to restore order with the authority of a seasoned pro. With that comforting thought in mind, Haruka settled into the rhythm of the chase, prepared to report back on whatever juvenile mischief these knuckleheads might be planning. After all, someone had to keep tabs on the delinquents, even if it meant enduring the most absurd conversation imaginable. However, he soon overhears the delinquents talk about using a miracle, Tanaka, for his ability so they can do whatever they want. The delinquents then get up to head back to camp, and Haruka can tell that they are up to no good. But he can't bring himself to intervene because that would require social interaction, and he is firmly against that. He heads back to his cave and starts grilling some mushrooms, but then he notices something that completely devastates him. His loner skill just leveled up, meaning even his status board recognizes him as a loner. This is probably because he chose to avoid his classmates, but still, it's not the worst thing that could happen. If anything, he would like to level up more because his overall level is still only 3. The main reason for this is that he has 2 skills that he can't level, Jack of all trades and dummy skills. To be honest, he's not even sure what the skills do. Jack of all trades probably means he will be good at most things he tries, but he will never be able to become a master in any particular craft, and that's pretty straightforward. But as for the dummy skill, the best explanation Haruka can come up with is something to do with puppets, but he's not sure about it. He decides to give up on trying to figure it out for now and just eat his dinner. But he still really wishes he had some meat. Haruka calls it a day and goes to bed for the night. But as he is trying to get some sleep, he hears a huge ruckus outside, and he can't just ignore it, so he gets up to figure out what's going on. As he leaves his cave, he is expecting to see the delinquents up to no good again, but to his surprise, it is actually the nerds this time. They are currently fighting a bunch of goblins, and it looks like they are having a bit of trouble. So Haruka considers helping them out, but he changes his mind once he sees their stats. They've got skills that are way better than his, and they are all level 16 while Haruka is still level 3. He figures they'll be alright without him, so he turns to walk away. But just before he leaves, he spots 2 goblins sneaking up behind the group, and the nerds are already struggling. If they get attacked from behind, they'll be wiped out for sure. Haruka is still on the fence about whether he should help them or not, but then he remembers a time the nerds shared their holographic Charizard with him, and he decides that they are worth saving. He runs out of the bushes with a stick in hand and easily one-shots both goblins in one swing. He then turns to the nerds and asks them if they are alright. The nerds are fine, but they are shocked to see Haruka out here. Once they'd gotten reacquainted, the nerds thank Haruka for his help. But he is having a hard time communicating with them since he hasn't spoken to real people for a long time now. He eventually takes them all back to his place, and the nerds are all amazed by how nice the interior is considering it's a cave. Haruka explains that he learned a little earth magic and crafting to help with the remodeling, but the nerds still think it's impressive that he did all this by himself. Haruka prepares a drink for them all and asks why they are in the middle of the woods so late at night. The nerds suddenly fall silent when the topic is brought up, and after a few seconds, they tell Haruka that they are actually on the run from the rest of the class right now. It all started after the class first got isekai'd here, and at first, everyone was just surprised by everything that just happened. But they were soon faced with the reality that they were stuck here, and they started freaking out over it. A few of them were calmer about the situation, like the popular girls, who seemed more annoyed than scared, the jocks who were trying to figure out what to do but knew nothing about isekai, and the nerds who were totally within their element. The class rep was just as confused as everyone else, but she had the common sense to realize that crying in an unknown forest is a good way to attract unwanted predators and get them all killed, so she tries to get everyone to quiet down. However, it was too late, as a group of goblins had already found the class, and the class rep had no idea how to handle these monsters. So she starts freaking out. Everyone else is freaking out as well, even the delinquents. But the nerds know someone has to handle this, so they all activate their skills so they can take down the goblins. The gym bros join in to help, and soon enough, all the goblins have been defeated. But it still isn't safe to be out here, so the class rep gets everyone's attention and says they should all find somewhere safe to stay before they get attacked again. A little while later, the class settles on setting up camp by the river, and the nerds take it upon themselves to teach everyone how to survive in this world with all the isekai knowledge they possess. The duties were evenly divided among all the members of the class, and everything seemed like it was going well until a popular girl suddenly said, "Nah, we don't want to do any work." The class rep tried to convince them that the work was necessary and all they had to do was help set up the tents, but the girls just didn't want to bother with it. And since the popular girls weren't doing anything, the delinquents decided that they would be lazy as well, leaving the class rep and the nerds to do all the work instead. On top of that, the nerds went out of their way to handle all the monsters that would try to attack the camp. And while it seemed like a lot of work, they had to do this for their own sake. Back in the White Room, the nerds saw two particularly disturbing skills get chosen. One was the charm spell that grants control over people, and another troubling one was the puppeteer skill, which pretty much does the same thing. They knew that one of the delinquents possessed the puppeteer skill, so the nerds wanted to level up quickly in order to be able to defend themselves against the delinquents. However, at night, the delinquents would go out and slay monsters as well, but only for the sake of leveling up so they could use their skills. While the nerds were eavesdropping on them, they began talking about how they would turn the girls into their slaves once they had enough levels to use their skills. The nerds realized that this would mean a lot of trouble, so they went to warn the class rep about it. However, just a few days later, the delinquents have leveled up enough to use their skills, and the class rep just so happened to be nearby. So they planned to make her their first victim. However, they ended up getting jumped by the nerds, and once they were down, their skills were sealed away so they wouldn't be able to cause harm. Now the delinquents are basically powerless, and as you would expect, the girls didn't take it well when they found out about the plan the delinquents had made. So the delinquents were kicked out of the camp. That would have been the end of it, but the delinquents were petty. So later that night, while the nerds weren't around to beat them up, the delinquents attacked the camp just to mess with everyone and ended up burning everything to the ground. Once there was nothing left, the delinquents retreated back into the forest, and by the time the nerds returned to camp, they were devastated to discover that all their hard work had been destroyed. Worse yet, the popular girls somehow blamed them for all the destruction and were giving them a really hard time for antagonizing the delinquents. The class rep stood up for them and reminded everyone that the nerds are the only reason they've been surviving out here so far. The nerds appreciated the class rep having their backs, but they couldn't spend another minute in a camp full of such ungrateful people, which is why they all went on the run. After hearing the whole story, Haruka feels really bad for them, so he decides to host a feast of mushrooms for them that night. He actually enjoyed spending time with other people for once. But by the next day, the nerds had to leave because they planned on heading downstream to find a village and start their lives as adventurers. They offered to let Haruka join them because they consider him a friend. While Haruka thinks of them as friends as well, he still has to decline their offer because he believes his trash skills would only hold the nerds back. With that said, he's also a bit worried about the situation at the class camp, mostly because the class rep is still there, and she's the only other person in the class that he likes. So he decides to go check it out. Along the way, he randomly runs into a kobold. The thing bites him a lot, but ultimately, he manages to kill it and continue his journey. By nighttime, he arrives at the riverside where the class camp should have been, but surprisingly, the place is totally deserted. He assumes they must have moved somewhere else, so he uses one of his detection skills to pick up some footprints and follows them until he eventually comes across the popular girls. Of everyone in the class, Haruka hates dealing with them the most, so he tries to turn around and head home, but the girls have already started chasing him. Haruka would have no trouble outrunning them, but he stops dead in his tracks when he hears them say the word please. In all the years Haruka has known them, please has never been in their vocabulary, so something serious must have happened for them to be this desperate. He decides to talk to them after all, and the first thing the girls do is ask him if he knows where the nerds went. Haruka is hesitant to tell them because he thinks they just want to yell at the nerds some more. But on the contrary, the girls actually want to apologize to them. They now realize how much the nerds were doing for them, and they sincerely want to make amends for the way they treated them. But by now, the nerds are long gone, so there's no way the girls would ever catch up to them. They can't make it out of the woods by themselves, and they can't defend themselves from monsters. So how do they intend to find the nerds? He asks them if they have the resolve to do whatever it takes to apologize to the nerds, but the girls break down crying because they know that they'll die in no time if they are left out in the woods by themselves. They plead with Haruka to teach them how to survive out here. He's so stunned by their sudden request that he ends up agreeing to it without thinking. As a result, Haruka's subjugate ability activates, and all of a sudden, the girls have become his subservient followers. Now all they do is blankly stare at him and finish off monsters whenever Haruka gets into a fight. Then they pull out the magic crystals and present them to him like puppies looking for praise. Haruka really isn't happy with how things are going, but for now he notices that one of the girls has a small injury on her arm, so he hands her a healing potion he made so she can recover. However, she just uses it on him instead. He's getting really sick of how the girls only do things for his benefit now, and he is really worried about how he's going to explain this to the class rep if he runs into her. And right on cue, the class rep just so happens to be walking through that part of the woods at the moment. He doesn't know what to say to her, and now that he thinks about it, he realizes he doesn't even know her name. They've been in the same class since elementary school, and she's always been kind to him as the class representative. She can't believe that after all this time, he never cared enough to learn her name. After a few moments, the other girls from their class show up because everyone, except for the popular girls, has been following the class rep's directions. When the class rep looks over at the popular girls, she notices them standing behind Haruka, but they seem lost, almost like they're sharing one brain cell. The class rep figures Haruka must have done something to them, but she isn't sure what exactly. He would like to say he's innocent, but the fact of the matter is that even if he didn't mean to do it, his skill turned the girls into his servants, and he doesn't know what to do about it. He tries his best to explain the situation without making himself seem like the bad guy, but none of the girls actually believe him. Haruka gives up on trying to prove he's innocent and decides to walk away. But before he can leave, the class rep makes him stay while she checks on Shimazaki to see if she's okay. Luckily, all it takes is a little shaking to break the subjugation spell, and Shimazaki tells the class rep she's fine. The class rep feels relieved hearing that, and Haruka thinks this means he can finally go, but she isn't done with him yet. She still wants to understand how the subjugation spell even happened in the first place, so she won't let Haruka leave just yet. While the girls keep talking, Haruka stands by a tree, left with nothing to do. Bored, he decides to practice his magic and starts thinking about how he can expand his house once he gets home. He tries to figure out how to make a basement, but things go wrong, and he accidentally buries himself in the ground up to his neck. He's stuck like that until the class rep finds him, and she is shocked to find him buried in the dirt when she just asks him to wait a few minutes. But boredom can make a guy do crazy things. She leans over Haruka's head to grab him so he can get out of the dirt, and once he is free, she apologizes for not trusting him since Shimazaki told her that he was just trying to help everyone. Haruka doesn't recall ever saying he would help everyone, but the class rep and the other girls are already thanking him, so he decides to just go with it. Since everything has been settled, he wants to head back home, but the girls start getting mad because he wants to leave them out in the wilderness without helping at all. The class rep suddenly realizes that Haruka mentioned having a home, so she asks him about it. Haruka casually explains that he had some extra time, so he ended up building a house. The class rep is completely shocked that Haruka managed to build an entire house all by himself, especially since they've all been struggling just to set up a simple camp. The other girls are equally surprised and impressed by what he's done. They decide to call a meeting and start talking amongst themselves, curious about Haruka's house. The class rep asks how many people can stay there, and Haruka explains that it could probably fit around 200 people if some of the furniture is moved around and the indoor pool is emptied. The class rep feels a little jealous hearing this, seeing how well Haruka has managed on his own. She can't believe that while they've been barely getting by, Haruka has been living in a house so big and fancy that it even has a pool. Meanwhile, the other girls are all looking at Haruka with even more admiration now, impressed by how much he's accomplished on his own. As much as she hates to bother him, she asks if she and the other girls can stay with him for the night since they are all currently homeless. Haruka freaks out because it's one thing to invite guys to stay over for the night, but this is an entire class's worth of girls, and he's having a hard time controlling himself. Once he calms down, Haruka begins leading them all to his house, but because of all the time he has spent roaming these woods, Haruka is far better at getting around. One of his skills is even giving him helpful pointers to keep him going in the right direction. Eventually, Haruka makes it back to his house with the girls, and after catching their breath, They are stunned by the magnificence of Haruka's house. It's been so long since they've had a roof over their heads or gotten to experience the wonders of indoor plumbing, so as soon as Haruka mentions that there's a bath over in that direction, the girls start frantically running toward it and strip down right there in front of Haruka. Haruka knows there's no way he can handle spending the whole night in the same room with all the girls, so he sets up a tent outside to be alone and gets ready to go to sleep. Just as he's about to settle in, the class rep walks into his tent, saying she has something she needs to talk to him about. First, she thanks him for all his help because she wouldn't have known what to do without him. After the nerds left, the gym bros decided to leave too, so the girls were left all alone. It's been really tough for them, but now that they've had a bath and a nice meal, the girls are feeling much better and are in good spirits again. Even though things seem to be okay now, the class rep feels like she's failed as a representative because she couldn't handle everything on her own. Haruka thinks she's being too hard on herself, pointing out that she's been the one holding the group together and keeping the girls safe this whole time. The class rep admits that may be true, but she feels like they just got lucky. They didn't run into any monsters, but if they had, she wouldn't have been able to protect the class as the nerds could. She feels powerless compared to them, and that weighs on her, even though things worked out in the end. Again, Haruka doesn't think she's being fair to herself because the nerds have practically spent their whole lives preparing for this situation, so it's natural that they would be able to handle themselves well. However, on her end, this was the first time he had ever even heard about isekai, so all things considered, she has been doing pretty well. The class rep feels a lot better after hearing him say she did a good job, although her accomplishments still seem insignificant compared to Haruka, who created a functioning household in just a week. She wishes him a good night and heads back inside. But with everything that happened today, there's no way Haruka is getting any sleep tonight. Early the next morning, Haruka wakes up and finds one of the girls sitting outside his tent, asking him to get up because breakfast is ready. It takes him a minute to realize what's going on, but when he finally does, he freaks out a little and says he actually wants to sleep in a little longer. The girl doesn't accept his answer and crawls on top of him to convince him to get out of bed, so Haruka gives up and asks what's for breakfast. He was expecting the usual mushroom soup with a side of extra mushrooms, but to his surprise, breakfast is actually fish today, and he is so excited that he accidentally headbutts the girl. The girl was slightly hurt, but Haruka couldn't care less because he finally got to eat something other than mushrooms, and he absolutely loved it. The class rep doesn't understand why he's so excited to be eating fish when he's been living next to the river this entire time. But while that may be true, Haruka simply sucks at fishing, so he's never been able to catch any. For the girls to be so used to eating fish, they must have a reliable method of catching them, so Haruka asks to see how they do it. The class rep agrees and takes Haruka to the river along with one of the girls who has a lightning magic skill, and as for how she catches fish, she kind of just electrocutes the water until the fish stop being alive. Haruka is really impressed, so he pleads with her to do it one more time, and while the girl doesn't really want to, she agrees anyway since Haruka is helping her out. She spawns another lightning ball, but before she can throw it into the river, Haruka takes the lightning ball and seals it with his packing skill. He tosses it in the river and is able to catch some fish as well, but on top of that, he also acquired lightning magic, so he won't be needing the lightning girl's help anymore. The class rep looks confused and asks Haruka what he just did, so he explains that by using his packing skill on a certain element, he can gain that type of magic. He thinks it's probably the result of his various skills combining, which is useful, but he doesn't find it impressive because he feels like most of his skills are still pretty useless. While the other girls are busy playing in the river, Haruka sits down with the class rep and asks what she and the others plan to do after this. The class rep says they haven't finalized the details yet, but their plan is to head for the nearest village and try to catch up with the nerds. However, if they're going to survive on their own and make it out of the forest safely, they'll need to level up. Haruka, wanting to help, offers to train them before they set off. A little while later, all the girls gather in the forest, ready for training. Before starting the training camp, Haruka asks them about their current levels, wanting to know where they stand before he begins helping them. The girls tell him that their levels are all above 15, and Haruka begins feeling depressed because he's still only level 7 after all this time in the forest. He honestly starts to doubt that the girls even need his help, so he decides to give them a small test and sets them up to fight a bunch of kobolds to see how well they do. The girls think this will be a piece of cake since the kobolds are only level 6, but a few moments later, they've all had their asses handed to them and are down for the count. The girls had no idea that the kobolds would actually fight back, so they all headed back to regroup and think of a new strategy. And for some reason, the strategy meeting is taking place in Haruka's magic tent. Haruka's tent can expand enough to fit everyone, but he still doesn't understand why the girls decided to come here in the first place. After thinking it over for a bit, the girls head back out, determined not to lose this time. Haruka is happy to see they're motivated, but deep down, he doesn't believe they'll win this time either. Once they leave, the girl who approached him earlier that morning comes up to him again and says she wants to apologize for how she acted before. She explains that she purposely got close to him just to see if he tried to take advantage of the situation, testing if he was trustworthy. At first she didn't trust him, but after seeing how he gave them a safe place to stay and food to eat, and is even helping them learn how to fight, she admits she now feels like she can trust him. She tells him she'll be back in the morning to wake him up with his breakfast. Haruka is glad to know she trusts him now, and he tells her he's looking forward to seeing her tomorrow, even though he still doesn't know her name, so for now he decides he'll just call her Fish Girl. The next morning, Haruka is happy to receive a fish from Fish Girl, but then he hears the other girls talking about going out to fight kobolds again for revenge. But before they can leave, class rep calls them back and says they need to train first because they are definitely going to lose again if they go back to fight now. She suggests they should practice fighting goblins, but when they actually start a fight against the goblins, it doesn't go well for the girls. Despite this loss, some of the girls still think they are ready to fight the kobolds, although a bunch of them pretend to be sick to avoid having to fight anymore. Haruka doesn't have a good feeling about how things will turn out, so he stays ready to jump in if he needs help. To his surprise, though, the girls actually learn from their past mistakes with the goblins and work together to defeat the kobolds. The class rep congratulates everyone on their victory, and Haruka feels relieved because this means the girls can take care of themselves now and won't need to stay with him anymore. He thinks he can finally go back to living his life alone, just like he prefers. However, the class rep approaches him and thanks him for agreeing to go with them to the nearest village. Haruka knows he never actually said he would join them, but the class rep seems very determined, and her insistence makes him feel guilty. Eventually, Haruka gives in and agrees to go with the class rep, even though it wasn't part of his plan. A little while later, everyone finishes packing their things and gets ready to leave the forest. Before they go, Haruka reminds them that they don't know what dangers they might encounter out there, so it's important for everyone to stay alert and keep their guard up. Meanwhile, in another part of the forest, one of the boys from the class is seen running for his life, clearly scared. In a moment of panic, he makes the mistake of looking back, and as he trips over a rock, he finds himself cornered by his attacker with nowhere to escape. Sadly, he ends up getting strangled to death right there. A short while later, Haruka stumbles upon a massive orc and immediately sees this as the perfect opportunity to give the girls a lesson on how to defend themselves in battle properly. He confidently tells them to step back and observe how he handles the situation. Armed with only a stick, Haruka charges straight at the orc. In response, the orc lifts its large club, preparing to smash him into the ground. However, when it looks down, it suddenly realizes that Haruka is no longer in its path. Haruka has cleverly hidden himself behind a nearby tree, and due to the orc's slow movements, it stands no chance of hitting him. Despite his evasiveness, Haruka knows he can't just dodge forever and must find a way to fight back. He starts strategizing, recalling how the nerds had informed him that physical attacks are mostly useless against orcs. The best way to take down a creature like this, he remembers, is by relying on a heavy dose of magic, rather than brute force. Hira pulls up his stat window to check if he has any usable magic, and he's got all the elements at his disposal, thanks to his packing skill. But before he gets the chance to use any of them, the orc finds his hiding spot and uses his club to destroy the tree. So Haruka is forced to dodge its strikes until he has finally had enough and appears behind the orc with his stick, knocking it to the ground. It turns out that the orc died from that, and he wasn't expecting that, since physical attacks aren't meant to work against this thing. The girls are upset because they didn't actually get to learn anything from him one-shotting the orc. So Haruka apologizes and says he will use magic to defeat the next one so they can learn. The next time Haruka spots an orc minding its own business, he prepares a flame spell in his hand and casually chucks it at the orc. As the spell collides with the orc's face, the monster goes down and doesn't get back up again. The girls are even more upset because they'll never learn to defend themselves if he keeps killing everything instantly. Later that night, the group finds themselves with an abundance of pub meat, so they decide to celebrate with a barbecue. While everyone else enjoys the feast, Haruka stays busy in the background, setting up numerous traps to ensure they aren't attacked while they sleep. His tent is also equipped with special properties that make it undetectable to enemies, so he feels confident that they'll be safe through the night. Once he's finished, Haruka turns his attention to planning the route for the next morning. He activates his max skill to scout the path ahead, but suddenly, his perception skill alerts him to the presence of someone nearby. Curious, he goes to investigate and spots 4 male figures emerging from the darkness. Initially, he's worried that it could be the delinquents, but as they get closer, he recognizes them as the gym bros. Relieved, Haruka realizes he won't have to engage in a fight after all. At the same time, the class rep was looking for Haruka and noticed him talking to the 4 guys over in the distance. Even if they aren't hostile, Haruka still wonders what the gym bros are doing out here to begin with. He assumes they must have been after the girls, but the bros adamantly deny it and say they came here looking for Haruka. He decides to believe them, but he still doesn't understand why they are going through all that trouble to avoid the girls. The bros explain that they can't trust the girls and inform him of a skill even worse than the charm and puppeteer skills that the delinquents wanted to use. Haruka recalls seeing something about a hijack skill, and that's exactly what the gym bros were referring to. The delinquents were really vocal about all the things they wanted to do with their mind control skills, but not once did they mention anything about the hijack skill. So that means they didn't have it, and if the delinquents didn't have it and the nerds didn't have it either, then that means one of the girls must have the skill and is keeping it hidden from everyone. Haruka decides to mess with the bros a little and tells them that he may be the one with the hijack skill, but the bros don't seem that worried. In fact, they seem relieved because they know Haruka is such a loner that he would never actively seek out people to hijack their skills. Haruka admits that he doesn't have the hijacking skill, although he does have a subjugating skill that can turn people into his pets. However, he prefers not to use it anyway. The bros just wanted to fill him in on the dangers of the hijack skill, so they say they are heading back into the woods to keep an eye on the delinquents since they seem pretty suspicious. Before they leave, they ask Haruka to apologize to the class rep and the rest of the girls for them since they ditched them without warning. The following day, everyone wakes up, and the girls seem unusually energetic. Feeling drained by their liveliness, Haruka decides to step away for some space. As he walks off, class rep approaches him, clearly nervous, and says she has something important to confess. She fidgets anxiously, preparing to admit that she's the one with the hijack skill. However, Haruka surprises her by revealing that he's known for a long time, thanks to his appraisal skill. Class rep is stunned, as only the nerds were aware of her secret. She asks why Haruka never mentioned it, and why he still chose to support her. Haruka casually responds that it never seemed like a big issue to him. Confused, she questions if he's not afraid of her, considering hijack allows her to steal someone else's skills by killing them, a terrifying ability. Yet, Haruka remains unfazed. He reasons that even the nerds didn't seem worried, and they sealed the charm and puppeteer skills from the delinquents but allowed her to keep the hijack skill. That, to Haruka, means they trusted her not to misuse it. Haruka shares that he feels the same, confident that class rep would never resort to killing anyone. Class rep is moved to tears after hearing that Haruka trusts her that much, and Haruka thinks it's funny since she's been crying a lot more often over the past few days. But she says it's his fault she's been crying so much. The group continues traveling through the forest, and after they've traveled a considerable distance, Haruka tells everyone they can take a break for now and pulls out a box of juice to sell to the girls. Unfortunately, none of them have any money, so one of the girls offers to pay in some other way if he gives her some juice, but class rep puts a stop to that immediately, so the girl doesn't get any juice. After the short break, the group gets moving again, and they are currently ahead of schedule. But it's still going to be dark before they make it to the village, so they'll have to camp outside again. Just then, Haruka notices a river nearby, and he thinks this is the perfect opportunity to try something out. So he asks class rep to look after the rest of the girls while he goes scouting. She asks if she can come with him, but Haruka wants to do this alone, so he speeds off before she can follow him. While running through the woods, Haruka activates his magic boost skill to reinforce his body, and then he casts weight magic on himself to make himself lighter. With this combination, he is able to move faster than ever before, and with enough force, he believes he should be able to fly. So he gives his theory a test and jumps high into the sky. It looks like it's working at first, but then he starts going back down, and before he knows it, he has crash landed on the forest floor. He nearly died from that fall, so he decides not to try that anymore and heads back to camp. When the class rep sees how badly injured he is, she gets really worried and asks what happened. Haruka explains that he launched himself up really high, but then gravity happened, he kind of fell and nearly died. Class rep starts yelling at him for doing something so dumb, but if it makes it any better, Haruka does manage to spot some berries while he is up in the sky. So he offers to make some juice for class rep, but she doesn't want any. The juice girl comes up to him and starts asking for juice again. The following day, the group sets off again, and things appear to be going well, despite the girl who got lost and the encounters with orcs. However, they manage to navigate their way out of the woods together. The girls are thrilled to finally be free from the forest, knowing that the village can't be too far ahead. Yet, Haruka feels uneasy, aware of their vulnerability now that they're exposed in the open. The hills obscure his view, preventing him from locating the village. To assess his options, he checks his stat window for any skills that might assist him. To his surprise, he discovers a new skill, airwalk, likely gained from his earlier failed flying attempt. Eager to test it, he gives it a shot, and to his delight, finds himself walking on air. Class rep quickly realizes that Haruka is missing and begins searching for him, only to be astonished when she spots him floating in the air. Looking down at her, Haruka explains that he's simply scouting ahead to ensure the road is safe. At first glance, everything appears calm, but soon he notices a group of villagers under attack by wolves. He descends and informs Class Rep that he didn't see much besides a few people being assaulted by the creatures. Class Rep argues that they need to help, but she also acknowledges that being attacked by monsters doesn't necessarily mean the villagers are innocent. The other girls are eager to rush over and save them, but Haruka points out that at their current distance, they wouldn't reach the villagers in time, even if they ran. Moreover, he worries about the possibility that these people might be bandits. Not wanting to put the group at risk, he suggests they ignore the situation and continue on their path. As he starts to walk away, Class Rep grabs his arm and urges him to think again. She insists that if the villagers turn out to be bandits and attempt to attack them, she'll be ready to fight them off. However, if they're genuinely in need, she wants to ensure they can help. Haruka already knew the Class Rep would be determined to help people, even if it puts her in danger. But as things are, the girls still suck at fighting, and there's not much they could do to help even if they went. So Haruka says he will handle it by himself instead. The people are too far away for him to run to, and even if he tries the weight magic from yesterday, he probably still won't make it. So he decides to try something new. He casts the magic boost and weight magic on himself as a final touch, using a powerful wind spell to act as a propellant. The spell is so powerful that the Class Rep ends up getting caught in it, but Haruka doesn't notice, so he blasts off and is headed straight for the villagers, while using airwalk to keep himself airborne. Haruka suddenly feels a tug on his cape and turns around, only to be taken aback by Class Rep clinging to him for dear life. She's clearly terrified and explains that she got caught up in his wind spell, and now they're too high up for her to let go, so she's forced to come along for the ride. As they near the villagers, Class Rep urges Haruka to stop, but he realizes he never actually considered how to land safely. This oversight results in a crash landing right in the midst of the battle between the villagers and the wolves. The impact knocks Class Rep out cold, but in an unexpected turn of events, all the wolves are instantly killed upon landing, leaving the villagers in utter shock and disbelief at what just transpired. While the Class Rep is still out cold, the leader of the group thanks Haruka for saving them and introduces himself as Ofter, and his friend as Gaik. If Haruka hadn't shown up, Off's entire party may have been wiped out, so he is truly grateful to him. Haruka asks what they are doing out here, so Off and Gaik explain that wolves have been attacking merchants out in these plains. So the Adventurers Guild put out a request for the wolves to be exterminated, and they thought they could handle it at first, but they quickly got overwhelmed. Their carriage has been destroyed, so they are going to have to carry everything back to the village by hand. And since there's not much for Haruka to do until the rest of the girls catch up, he decides to share some of the roasted mushrooms he carries on himself for emergencies. Gaik is surprised Haruka would share something like this with them since these are anicap mushrooms, and they are extremely rare because they restore a person's stamina almost immediately. The rest of the girls from the class soon show up, and they are excited to meet the elf and knight ladies at Off's party, so they all get along well. Off offers to lead them all to the town he came from, so before long, the group arrives at the town of Omu, and they are excited to finally be back in civilization. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, the delinquents have been steadily leveling up over the past few days. With a significant boost in their experience, they now set their sights on targeting the girls to exact their revenge. However, before they can carry out their plans, they realize they need to have their puppeteer and charm skills unsealed. Therefore, they decide to confront the nerds first, hoping to retrieve those abilities before going after their true targets. After leveling up a lot recently, they're ready to go after the girls for revenge. But first, they need to unseal their puppeteer and charm skills, so they plan to target the nerds. Meanwhile, the girls happily explore the city, admiring everything around them. But class rep reminds them they're broke and still have a lot to do. She then runs off to round up all the girls, and Haruka smiles because now that he has successfully helped everyone make it to the city, they shouldn't need him anymore, and that means he can go back to his peaceful lunar lifestyle. Class rep is having a hard time getting the girls to behave themselves, so she asks Haruka to help her out a little. But Haruka is already relaxing in the shade since his job is done. She gets upset, and while she understands that he is relieved they are finally in the city, there's still a lot of stuff they need to do. She blows on her whistle to get all the girls' attention, and once they've all filed in, she goes over the plan she came up with. First, everyone plans to go to the Adventurers Guild. There, they'll sell all the items they picked up along the way. After selling, they'll register with the guild to make things official, and then rent a room at an inn for the night. They also plan to ask around to see if anyone has seen the nerds pass through recently. The plan sounds solid, but the popular girls feel a bit offended that class rep treats the nerds like some small side mission, so she apologizes. Haruka, however, teases the popular girls for caring so much about the nerds, which annoys them. Shortly after, the group heads to the Adventurers Guild, and when they finally arrive, Haruka finds it more intimidating than he expected. Everyone inside is giving them dirty looks already, and he really doesn't want to head inside, but After tells him the guild master wants to meet with him. This sounds like bad news, so Haruka tells class rep to get all the girls registered while he goes to see what the guild master wants. He heads upstairs, and all the people here look even scarier than the ones downstairs, so he's put on edge. He finds Gaitek waiting at the end of the room, and Gaitek leads Haruka into the guild master's office, where he comes face to face with this scary-looking man. But it looks like he was worried for nothing because the guild master just wanted to thank him for saving After and his party. After that's done, Haruka heads back downstairs, and he notices a counter, so he assumes that's where you go to sell magic stones and heads over to ask the attendant. The attendant confirms that he can sell his magic stones here, so Haruka dumps a bunch of stones out from his bag, and there's a lot more where that came from. But the attendant asks him to stop because he's already dropped 2 days worth of overtime on her desk, so she just asks him to come back tomorrow so she can finish appraising all of these first. Haruka doesn't mind waiting, and the girls are all done registering as adventurers anyway, so he needs to hurry up and register as well. He proudly walks into the registration room to get himself assessed, but once the assessment is done, the guild worker tells Haruka that he is too weak to become an adventurer. The guild requires people to be at least level 10 before they can register to become adventurers, and even then, you'd have to be in a party to qualify. But if Haruka wanted to register as a solo adventurer, he would have to be at least level 20. However, he's only level 9 right now, and his skill prevents him from forming a party, so he's going to be unemployed for a long time. Later that night, class rep leads everyone to the place the guild set up for them to stay. When they arrive, Haruka gets nervous because the building reminds him of a love hotel. But it's just regular lodging, so they all say goodnight and go to their own rooms. In the morning, they gather at the diner for breakfast, where class rep excitedly shares that the town is known for being very safe. This means everyone is free to explore and enjoy the day as they like. The girls are thrilled and start planning a shopping trip for later, knowing they're now well prepared to manage on their own. Haruka, seeing their set, decides he'll head back into the woods as soon as he gets paid for his crystals. Speaking of which, Haruka heads to the guild after breakfast to see if they are done appraising his magic stones. But when he gets there, he is met with sincere apologies because they don't have enough money on hand to pay him all at once. The guild master appears and personally apologizes to Haruka, asking if he'd accept payments from the guild in installments. Haruka agrees, showing his understanding, and the guild master expresses his gratitude. Meanwhile, he offers Haruka the amount for the magic stones already appraised, handing over a bag containing 8 million era. Based on what Haruka and class rep have gathered since arriving in Omu, they realize the currency here holds the same value as money back on Earth. With this, Haruka has just become rich. His payment is so high because he brought in more Fank stones than the guild has ever seen. And he also defeated those green wolves, so that contributed to the payout. Since he just got a small fortune, Haruka decides to do a little shopping before heading back into the forest, and Getek says he knows a place that Haruka might want to visit. Haruka assumes Getek is taking him to a flashy adult place, but to his surprise, Getek only leads him to an old, worn-down weapon shop. Getek explains that this shop gathers unique gear from dungeons, and considering Haruka's unusual needs, Getek thinks this is the perfect spot for him to find the right equipment. Though the shop seems shady, Getek reassures Haruka of its quality. Trusting Getek, Haruka decides to browse, but he insists on trying items first to see their effects. Even though the items look odd, their abilities are impressive, so Haruka ends up spending the entire day there, buying as much as his budget allows. Just then, he notices a necklace that looks good. The only description his appraisal skill gives is that it fits 7. Come to think of it, Haruka got the same message when he tried to appraise his villager set, so he decides to ask the shopkeeper if he knows what fit 7 is supposed to mean. The shopkeeper explains that in the case of the necklace, it is able to combine the effects of up to 7 items and allows the wearer to use them all at once. That sounds really useful to Haruka, and if the effect also applies to his villager set, then that means he can stack even more effects onto his equipment. It's about to begin sorting through all the items for the best effects to combine, but just then, class rep shows up and starts yelling at him for staying out so late. Haruka realizes that he has been here for a while, but he still has a lot more stuff he wants to try out. However, as he is holding one of the items, it suddenly starts reacting, and before he realizes it, all the items in front of him get combined into one. The shopkeeper is furious because Haruka hasn't paid yet, and everything he grabbed is worth over 10 million. Haruka panics, realizing he doesn't have that much money, so Getek steps in and begs the shopkeeper to take 8 million instead. Reluctantly, the shopkeeper agrees. The next day, Haruka is miserable, knowing he's blown all his money and is now completely broke. He wants to go outside to gather crystals to earn more, but there's a problem. Only registered adventurers are allowed to leave town to hunt monsters, making it impossible for him to go out and earn anything. He already tried to sneak out with some of the girls, but class rep caught him and started yelling at him some more. He has the perfect plan to sneak out without class rep spotting him. His villager cloak was combined with an invisibility cloak, so with this, he should be able to make it out of the city unnoticed. He sneakily walks past class rep and the other girls, and he feels bad for leaving them without saying anything. Class rep would definitely try to stop him if she found out. Haruka manages to successfully escape the lodging, and once he's outside, he makes the misguided decision to take off his invisibility cloak. As he tries to jump over the wall, 2 girls who are outside spot him and curiously ask where he is going. Startled, Haruka panics and accidentally crashes his family jewels against the wall, which causes him to fall back to the ground. In pain, he yells at the girls, expressing his frustration for scaring him so suddenly. The girls, however, just explained that they were only trying to find out why he was attempting to jump over the wall. Their innocent question surprises him, making him realize they were only concerned and not trying to cause trouble. Haruka recognizes the girls as part of the athletic group, but one of them is missing. So he uses his perception skill to locate her, and to his horror, he discovers that she is about to strip naked in the middle of the street. Haruka and the athletic girls all rush over to stop her, but even though they manage to get to her before she could completely undress, Haruka's escape plans have been ruined. The next day, all the girls are heading out to complete a quest for the guild, and Haruka asks if they will let him join them. Class rep refuses because she doesn't trust him after he tried to ditch the group yesterday. She assures him that they will be back in no time, and Haruka says he will wait. But as soon as class rep and the others have left, he starts smiling because he has no intention of waiting for them. He has learned from his mistake yesterday, so he keeps his cloak on and waits until he is outside the city gates before he takes it off. He has officially made it out of the city, and nothing is stopping him from making it back to his house in the forest. As he runs, Haruka notices a group of destroyed buildings in the distance. Normally, this would lead to a long side quest, but he just wants to get back to his house, so he chooses to ignore it. He also spots a horde of goblins nearby, which would give him a lot of experience if he decided to fight them. But once again, his focus is on returning to the forest. While he is running, he sees a carriage being attacked by bandits, and he knows he should help since the people inside are calling out for assistance. However, he still decides to ignore it and keep moving forward. Just as he tries to leave the scene, the bandits notice him and decide to attack. He tries to explain to them that he doesn't want to get involved in their fight, but they refuse to back off. Since he cannot avoid the situation any longer, he feels he has to defend himself. With a quick decision, he casts a powerful fire spell that instantly defeats the bandits, showcasing his magic skills. The staff Haruka is holding is a result of one of the item combinations he got stuck with, and it turns out that it's pretty powerful. As the bandits get back up, Haruka once again tries to talk his way out of the fight, so he tells the bandits that they should just leave him alone if they know what's good for them. The bandits admit that Haruka's magic is powerful, but since they assume magic is the only thing he's good at, they all decide to attack him in close quarters. However, Haruka is easily able to knock them down with one strike each. The bandits can't believe they are losing to a single kid, so they ask what Haruka's job is. He is still unemployed, so that question stings a lot. The bandits decide to check Haruka's status so they know what they're up against, but as soon as they see that he's only level 9, they decide that they can beat him if they use their weapon skills. Even though they've been losing so far, weapon skills are only available from level 20, so he doesn't have any, and from what he knows, weapon skills are really powerful, so he's a little worried. The bandits begin using their weapon skills, but while it is certainly dangerous, they keep yelling out their attack before they use it, so Haruka is easily able to dodge until they all pass out from exhaustion. Just then, Haruka notices a girl walking toward him from behind. This is the last thing he wants because it looks like an unavoidable side quest he cannot escape. The girl's name is Marielle, and she comes from a noble family. She wants to thank Haruka for helping her earlier. However, as she thinks about it, she remembers that Haruka tried to ignore her at first, making her unsure if she should really be thanking him. Still, despite his initial attitude, she truly appreciates that he stopped to help her. Marielle has a favor to ask of him. She explains that her father is the lord of a particular city, and that she hopes Haruka will accompany her back to that city because she feels worried for her safety. At first, Haruka is hesitant and doesn't want to agree to her request. However, when Marielle mentions that she could reward him for his help, he reconsiders and decides to go with her after all. He knows this could lead to new opportunities and adventures. As they travel together, Marielle curiously asks Haruka where he was coming from when they first met. Haruka takes this opportunity to vent his frustrations about the awful city he just left. He explains that the guild there didn't have enough money to pay him, which led them to refuse to register him as an adventurer. He adds that the city even stopped him from leaving without a special permit. As he talks, Marielle begins to understand which city he is referring to, and she suddenly starts to cry. She had not realized how poorly Haruka thinks of the city her father governs. Seeing her emotional reaction makes Haruka feel uneasy, and it dawns on him that she is the daughter of the Lord of Omi. This realization hits him hard because it means that their carriage is actually heading back to that very city. Now he feels a deep regret about agreeing to escort her, knowing he will have to face the consequences of his earlier complaints about the place. In the forest, tension rises as the gym bros and the delinquents prepare for a confrontation. The gym bros stand firmly against the delinquents, determined to protect the girls from any harm. The leader of the delinquents is ready to fight and has no qualms about hurting the gym bros to get what he wants. He raises his sword high, signaling that he is about to attack. However, just as he is about to make his move, something unexpected happens. Suddenly, he feels a sharp pain as he gets stabbed from behind. This twist changes everything in an instant, leaving everyone shocked and unsure of what will happen next. The main leader of the bad guys, the gym bros' enemies, is ready to kill them. He raises his sword, ready to strike, but just as he's about to attack, someone sneaks up behind him and stabs him. The bad guys are shocked. They want to fight back, but before they can do anything, another one of them gets stabbed. The last two decide to strike at the same time for better odds of winning. But the unknown attacker is easily able to take them down as well. After seeing this, the gym bros realize they are outmatched, so they attempt to run away, but the assailant is too quick for them to escape. So he appears in front of them and begins menacingly walking forward. Marielle drags Haruka back to town. He really didn't want to go, but she started crying, so he felt bad and went with her. When they arrive at the Lord's big and fancy house, Marielle leaves him alone for a moment. Haruka looks around the house. It's a really nice house, but he doesn't care. He just wants to leave. He starts walking towards the front door, ready to go home as soon as possible. He doesn't want to stay here any longer than he has to. Marielle gets back just as Haruka is about to leave. She's angry because she asked him to wait while she was changing. She says he should wait a bit longer because she wants to thank him for helping her. Haruka doesn't want to wait, but Muriel is being really insistent, so he has to do what she says. He may have been against staying here at first, but once Muriel shows him the feast she had prepared for him, he completely changes his attitude. Muriel does this as her way of showing Haruka some appreciation, but she's starting to get annoyed because Haruka is totally ignoring her while he's stuffing his face with food. Muriel asks one of her maids to bring the rest of Haruka's reward, so a pouch of money is brought, and while Haruka acknowledges it, he doesn't seem all that excited. As a bonus, Muriel noticed that Haruka isn't registered with the city, so she went through the liberty of getting a custom ID card made for him, which will grant him permission to leave and enter the city anytime he wants. That's a really cool gift, but Haruka stopped paying attention after he received the money and has been much more focused on the dessert that was brought to him. The next day, the class president and the other girls ask Haruka about what happened last night. Haruka tells them that a very important person called him to their big house. The class president knows he's telling the truth, but she's still curious why this important person would want to see him. Haruka doesn't want to tell them the real reason, so he just gives them a simple answer. He doesn't want them to know that he met Muriel while he was trying to escape. Eventually, the girls let it go and decide to go out on a mission, but before they leave, class rep reminds Haruka that he's not allowed to leave town, and Haruka seems oddly compliant this time. But that's just because he knows there's nothing stopping him from leaving town once the girls leave. With his custom ID, he can finally get out of town without any hassle, but before he goes, there are a few things he has to do first. He uses his money to buy some new equipment, eats as much good food as possible, and then starts writing a note for class rep to find so she won't get mad about him leaving. He writes down that he's going back to the forest to check on the gym bros, and while he's just writing it as an excuse, he really is worried about those muscle heads. He heads outside, and after presenting his ID, he is allowed to leave town, and this time he won't let himself get distracted by any annoying side quests. Haruka returns to the forest. He's relieved to see that everything looks the same. He can't wait to get back home. But as he's walking, a big, ugly orc suddenly jumps out from behind a tree and tries to hit him on the head. Luckily, Haruka is strong and fast. He quickly dodges the orc's attack and hits it with his stick, killing it instantly. It's really strange to see an orc here. Orcs usually live deep in the forest, far away from here. Haruka wonders why this orc is so far from its home. And that's not the only strange thing he discovers, because he finds a human blood trail nearby. He knows the blood couldn't have come from the nerds since they are too strong to lose to anything in the forest, so he assumes it must have come from one of the gym bros. Haruka follows the trail of blood until he finds the gym bros. They're lying under a tree, covered in blood and barely breathing. At first, Haruka thinks they're dead, but as he gets closer, he realizes they're still alive. He quickly uses all of his healing potions on them, hoping to save their lives. After a while, the gym bros slowly start to regain consciousness. They tell Haruka what happened. Haruka had thought that the bad guys, the delinquents, had attacked them. But the jocks tell him that all the delinquents are dead. Haruka is surprised. He asks if the nerds were also attacked, but the jocks don't know. They think the nerds are probably safe because they left the forest a long time ago. They can tell that Haruka intends to go after the person who did this, so they warn him that Tanaka is insanely strong now, so much so that they barely last a couple of seconds against him. Plus, he stole all their overpowered weapons, so now he's even stronger than he was before. They think he must have been planning this whole thing from the moment the class got teleported here, and they don't know if they'll be able to stop him. But they know who his next target is going to be. Of all the students still alive, the class president is the most likely target. The class president has a special power that Tanaka, the bad guy, wants. Haruka thinks Tanaka might try to hurt the class president to get this power. But only 3 people know about this power, the class president, Muriel, and Haruka. So Haruka is wondering how Tanaka found out about it. The jocks figured it out because Tanaka kept asking them where the class president was. When they couldn't tell him, he hurt them really badly. They didn't want to go looking for class rep, since that would put her in danger, so they came to the area around Haruka's house in hopes that he would find them before they died. With how strong he is, they are sure they'll be able to win if they all fight together. But Haruka doesn't know if he really wants to get involved in a battle like this in the first place. He specifically wanted to avoid side quests, but if class rep is being targeted, he has no choice but to put a stop to it. However, he makes it clear to the jocks that this is a battle he will be fighting alone. The jocks try to talk him out of it, since going alone is insanely risky, but when they see the look in his eyes, they realize he is serious about it, so they agree to let him go alone. Haruka tells the jocks that they should go to town and meet up with the other girls. He tells them that they should say sorry to the class president because they left her earlier. Haruka watches the jocks leave. He thinks it might be helpful to have them fight alongside him, but he's also worried. If Tanaka defeats them all, then no one will be left to warn the girls about the danger. He decides it's best to fight Tanaka alone. He needs to be fully prepared for the battle. Meanwhile, back in the village, the class president is very worried about Haruka. She knows he left the city, and she's concerned about his safety, as well as that something bad might happen to him. The other girls tell her there's nothing to be worried about since Haruka will definitely come back. Back in the forest, Haruka is thinking over his game plan against Tanaka because the jocks told him that Tanaka has incredibly powerful weapon skills. Even the weapon skills of no-name bandits are frightening, but something Haruka learned after dealing with them is that a weapon skill animation can't be cancelled once it is started. Haruka thinks that if Tanaka tries to attack him with a special skill, he needs to find a way to counter it. Haruka needs to get stronger or level up. He needs to fight stronger enemies to get more experience points. Just then, he sees a group of goblins. They're attracted to the blood of the jocks, and they're pretty strong. Haruka fights and kills all the goblins, hoping to gain experience. But even after defeating them, his level hasn't increased. He wishes he could fight something even stronger. Just as he thinks this, a huge goblin king appears. Haruka gets ready for the toughest fight of his life. The goblin king is strong, and its attacks are also really fast, but Haruka is able to jump out of the way at the last second. The Goblin King is incredibly strong and dangerous. If it hits Haruka, he'll be dead. Haruka knows he can't fight it normally. He needs to think of a clever strategy. He uses a special power to combine all his other powers into one super powerful move. With this new, combined power, he can move incredibly fast. He zooms past the Goblin King and attacks it with incredible speed. The Goblin King is defeated. He's really glad to see that his idea to combine different skills worked out so well, but in the middle of his celebration, a terrifying presence appears behind him, so he's forced to fall back and prepare for another fight. This monster is a Goblin Emperor, and it's already at level 50, while Haruka is still only level 9, so he doesn't think there's any way he can beat this thing if he fights it head-on. His only option is to try out his combined skill again, so he activates it and charges straight at the Goblin Emperor. Haruka tries to attack the Goblin Emperor, but it doesn't work. The Goblin Emperor is incredibly strong. It gets up after Haruka's attack like nothing happened and starts attacking him even faster. The Goblin Emperor is using special powers to fight, making it very difficult for Haruka to defend himself. Haruka needs to find a chance to attack back. He waits for the perfect moment, and then he attacks the Goblin Emperor in the chest. The Goblin Emperor flies backward, but it's only a temporary setback. The Goblin Emperor starts to heal itself, ready to continue the fight. If regular attacks aren't going to get him anywhere in this battle, Haruka thinks he's going to have to make up another combined skill. But before he can do that, the Goblin Emperor uses one of its weapon skills and launches powerful slashes at Haruka. Haruka barely manages to block the attack, and with all these injuries, his chances of winning aren't looking good, but he has to keep going if he wants to become strong enough to protect his friends. He gets back up and charges at the Goblin Emperor in a desperate attempt to defeat it. By the time morning comes, Haruka is the last one standing, and because of his efforts, he's gained 2 levels. Now that he is level 11, Haruka heads back to his house to check out his status window. Just as he expected, his new level has granted him several new skills, but he's not sure if it will be enough for him to beat Tanaka in a fight. Still, with his made-up skill, he's able to attack in a split second to take advantage of the weapon skill animation, so he's just going to have to hope things work out in his favor. Later that night, Tanaka, the bully, goes to Haruka's house. Haruka has been waiting for him. Haruka remembers when Tanaka was always picked on by the jocks, but now Haruka knows that Tanaka was just pretending to be weak. He was waiting for the perfect moment to get revenge. Meanwhile, the girls are walking back to town after a long day of exploring. As they walk, they see some strange men sitting outside the town walls. They're not sure who these men are or what they want. They soon realize that it's the jocks, and they are glad to see them, but they are also really worried because the jocks are in pretty bad shape. Class rep remembers Haruka saying he was going to check on the jocks in his note, so she asks them if they know where he is, They tell her that Haruka is currently fighting in the woods to protect them all. Back in the woods, Tanaka is disappointed to learn that Haruka is the only one here since he was hoping to see class rep instead. He even went through all the trouble of getting the delinquents to cause trouble and split up the class. Haruka realizes Tanaka has been behind everything so far, and Tanaka intends to kill as many people as it takes to get what he wants. But he doesn't see Haruka as much of a threat, so he decides to leave the loser alone and go looking for class rep so he can steal her hijack skill. Haruka doesn't really like his classmates, but he still wants to keep them safe, so he stands in front of Tanaka and says, "You can't go any further." Tanaka is annoyed that Haruka is stopping him. He thinks Haruka is just a nobody and doesn't understand why he's getting in the way. But Tanaka is ready to kill Haruka if that's what it takes to finish his plan. Tanaka creates a shockwave and charges at Haruka, who quickly raises his hands to protect himself. Before leaving Whiterun, Tanaka noticed that only useless skills were left on the skill board, so even though he doesn't know exactly what skills Haruka has, he is sure that Haruka can't be better than him. Tanaka then uses magic to summon several large rocks and sends them flying toward Haruka. Haruka tries to block the rocks, but before he can fully defend himself, Tanaka uses a metal skill that slows Haruka down and makes his movements harder. Haruka freezes for a moment, struggling to move, and just barely manages to dodge out of the way in time, avoiding being crushed by the rocks. The rocks hit the ground around him, causing the earth to shake, but Haruka can keep his balance, though his body feels slower and heavier because of the metal skill. Tanaka smiles, thinking he's got the upper hand now, knowing Haruka struggles to move as quickly as before. Haruka's heart races and he knows he needs to act fast, but the pressure of Tanaka's attack keeps building. Even though he can still move, he's a lot slower than normal due to Tanaka's skill, and Tanaka intends to take full advantage of Haruka's debuff. He begins spawning crystal spikes beneath him. Haruka manages to evade all the spikes by jumping side to side, but he won't be able to keep this up for much longer. Tanaka commends Haruka for surviving this long against him, but he has one question he wants to ask before he finishes Haruka off. He wants to know when Haruka first started suspecting him of being up to no good. Haruka tells him that he has been suspicious from the very start because there had to have been a reason why Tanaka was sticking around the delinquents back then. Tanaka is impressed that Haruka's instincts were spot on, but now Haruka has a question he wants to ask as well. He wants to know when Tanaka began plotting his despicable plan, and Tanaka proudly states that he has been planning this out from the very beginning. It was a bit of a setback when he realized that the class rep had gotten the hijack skill instead of him, but once he got his metal skill, a skill that allows him to interfere with the movements of others to an extent, he knew he could still come out on top. He played his cards right. Tanaka tries to trap Haruka with magic roots, then shoots a huge fireball at him. He thinks this will finish Haruka, but Haruka surprises him by absorbing the magic and coming out unscathed. Haruka wasn't sure if it would work, but he was glad he put that magic-absorbing vine on his staff. While Tanaka is shocked, Haruka attacks. Tanaka blocks Haruka's attack with a sword, but Haruka is too quick and strong. Sure, he was surprised that Haruka managed to block his fire magic, but magic isn't his only means of attacking. In fact, he has so many weapons at his disposal that he's having a hard time deciding which weapon he should use to kill Haruka. For fun, he decides that he will just use them all to shred Haruka to pieces and charges forward to attack. Haruka tries his best to defend himself, but with all the different attack patterns Tanaka is using, he's unable to keep track of him. Eventually, Haruka gets caught off guard and is knocked backward into some bushes, and by the time he gets up, Tanaka lands a devastating slash that sends Haruka flying across the forest floor. Haruka survives the slash, but he is out of breath and struggling to get back up. Tanaka soon catches up to him and stands over Haruka's body with a smug look on his face, and as much as Haruka doesn't want to admit it, he might be cooked. Tanaka is using a lot of different attacks and skills, so Haruka guesses he copied them from their classmates. Tanaka is surprised Haruka figured it out so fast. Haruka thinks Tanaka wants the class rep skill to steal everyone else's powers. Tanaka wants to be the strongest. Tanaka attacks Haruka with a scythe, and Haruka is pushed back. Haruka won't be able to handle much more of this, so he tries to launch an attack of his own to catch Tanaka off guard. But as he strikes, it turns out that Tanaka just used illusion magic to trick him. After seeing that nothing he does will work against Tanaka, Haruka seemingly gives up and stands still while Tanaka charges at him with a sword. But at the last second, he says psych and dodges the sword while whispering in Tanaka's ear that he's figured out his secret. Tanaka is no longer able to easily land hits on Haruka, and Haruka explains that he was intentionally letting Tanaka unleash all the attacks he had at his disposal so he could find a weakness. While Tanaka was attacking, Haruka noticed that he never used the same skill more than twice for some reason, and from that, he deduced that there must be a limit to how many times Tanaka could use his copied skills. So if he just keeps dodging long enough, Tanaka is going to run out of skills. Tanaka is a bit panicked that Haruka was able to figure out his weakness, but he still believes he can take Haruka down before he runs out of skills. However, as he tries to strike Haruka, Haruka is easily able to leap over him and counterattack him. Haruka has gotten used to Tanaka's speed, so no matter how many different skills Tanaka throws at him, Haruka won't be caught off guard anymore. Haruka charges towards Tanaka to land a finishing blow while he's still disoriented, but he is forced to back off when Tanaka suddenly fires a laser beam at him. Even if Haruka knows Tanaka's secret weakness, he is still overpowered, so he shouldn't be underestimated in the slightest. Tanaka is starting to show signs of exhaustion, but he gets back to his feet and yells that he will never allow himself to lose to the likes of Haruka. He may be at a disadvantage now, but he still has one trick up his sleeve, so he starts darting around the forest to overwhelm Haruka. Tanaka's movements are so fast and unpredictable that Haruka struggles to keep up with him. Each time Haruka thinks he has figured out where Tanaka is going, Tanaka changes direction again. It's like Tanaka is always one step ahead, making it impossible for Haruka to predict his next move. Haruka tries his best to stay focused and find an opening, but by the time he starts to understand what Tanaka is planning, it's already too late. Tanaka has already used his death skill, and it hits Haruka before he can react. The moment the skill takes effect, Haruka feels his body go limp, and he falls to the ground, unable to move. Tanaka stands over him, laughing loudly in victory, proud of finally defeating him. Tanaka knows he used almost all of his stored skills in this fight, but he doesn't care. To him, it doesn't matter because once he kills all his classmates and takes the hijack skill for himself, he'll be able to steal all the powerful skills he needs. With those skills, he can be unbeatable and gain even more permanent abilities that will make him the strongest. Tanaka smiles to himself, confident that nothing can stop him now. He then kicks Haruka's head and begins walking away, but as he is leaving, Haruka speaks up and says it's rude to step on someone's head without apologizing. Tanaka can't believe Haruka is still alive because the death skill has a 100% success rate on people who are over level 11, but Haruka has a skill that makes him resistant to negative status effects. Plus, Haruka rolled double M's when he first got here, so his luck stat is maxed out, which is probably why the death effect didn't work on him. He just fell to the ground for dramatic effects since he thought it would be funny. Tanaka doesn't see the humor in any of this and questions how Haruka is even able to move in the first place, since Tanaka used metal to restrict his movements from the very start of the fight. Haruka admits that the metal skill is really troublesome, and in reality, Haruka hasn't been able to move his body at all since Tanaka used that skill on him. But he happens to have a puppet skill, so he has been using that to control his body from the outside this entire time. Haruka is using his skills in a really cool way. Tanaka can't believe he's losing to Haruka's weird skills. Tanaka keeps attacking, but Haruka is too fast and blocks every attack. Haruka tells Tanaka that he's going to lose if he keeps fighting like this. Tanaka doesn't listen and swings his sword, but Haruka dodges it easily and tells Tanaka that it's over. Tanaka doesn't understand how this could happen to a genius like him, since he'd have perfectly calculated everything to make sure he would come out on top no matter what. 1 + 1 always adds up to 2, so according to his math, Haruka should never have been able to become this strong. Haruka tells Tanaka that his way of thinking is very naive because, sure, math made sense when they were back on Earth, but the laws of physics don't apply here. Tanaka has always been a genius when it came to school, so he was constantly bored out of his mind and surrounded by his idiotic classmates. He wished there was a way to put an end to his monotonous school life, and his prayers were answered when the class got summoned to this world. As soon as he saw the skill board, he quickly did some calculations to figure out what the most exciting way to live his new life would be. He came to the conclusion that he had to kill all his classmates and take their skills for himself. Tanaka wants to be the strongest, so he's trying to kill everyone and take their powers. Haruka tries to stop him, but Tanaka keeps attacking. Haruka is getting tired, but he keeps fighting. Just when Haruka thinks he's going to win, Tanaka uses a new trick. he makes a sword attack Haruka from behind. Haruka is hurt, but he doesn't give up. He hits Tanaka with his staff and knocks him down. Tanaka lost because he only relied on copying other people's powers, while Haruka learned to use his own skills in creative ways. Tanaka desperately tries to stab Haruka with his sword skill, but Haruka is way ahead of him and takes him out with his made-up skill. With this, Tanaka is fatally wounded and falls over dead, but even though Haruka ends up winning this battle, he is still badly wounded in the process, and all the pain comes rushing back to him the second he relaxes. On top of that, all the skills he used during the fight have left him completely drained, so he is on the verge of passing out. However, just before he hits the ground, Haruka is caught by the nerds. He's glad to see them, but he really wishes they had shown up a lot sooner so they could help him with the fight. They may have missed all the fighting, but they are here to help now. Haruka is grateful for the help, but he wonders how they even knew he was out here. So they explained that the class rep found them just as they were leaving the dungeon, so she told them all about the fight Haruka was in. And they couldn't just stand by and let him handle it all by himself, so they took off and headed into the woods to help him. Eventually, they all make it back to the city, and all the girls are standing by the gate to greet Haruka. They are all really worried about him and say they have a feast prepared in his honor, but all the attention is making Haruka feel really awkward. Just then, the leader of the gym bros comes out to see Haruka. But as a bro, he doesn't need any words and just daps Haruka up in celebration of his victory. Now that that's done, the girls suggest that they all head back to the inn since the baths are ready, and they could all use a good scrub down. After the fight, Haruka is feeling exhausted, but the girls quickly pull him away, guiding him towards safety. As this happens, the popular girls who have been watching from a distance finally stay behind to talk to the nerds. They approach them with serious expressions, and this time, they apologize for how they treated them before. The nerds are shocked because they never expected the popular girls to show this kind of humility. It's a moment of change for everyone, and the nerds realize that the girls really do understand now that they were wrong about them. They start to appreciate all the things the nerds did for the group and how much they contributed. All of this feels like a big turning point, and Haruka notices how things seem to be falling into place. With everything feeling wrapped up, he starts to think there's no real reason for him to stay any longer. He decides it's time for him to slip away and go back to his peaceful life in the woods. However, just as he's about to sneak off, the class rep spots him from across the group. She calls out to him, asking where he thinks he's going. Haruka freezes, caught off guard, and he realizes that his plan to disappear may not work out quite as smoothly as he thought. She was so worried that he might end up dead from his fight, and now that he's finally back, he's trying to leave again. Haruka apologizes, and the class rep says it's fine as long as Haruka doesn't try to ditch them again. And this time, all the girls will be watching him, so there's no way he's getting away from them again. After a bizarre dream the following day, Haruka awakens and goes downstairs, where the nerds greet him. Haruka is a little intrigued because they have been dungeon diving a lot lately, and it appears that they will be entering the dungeon once more today. The nerds acknowledge that the reason they have been so busy lately is because they are searching for a very rare item that only appears in the dungeon. When Haruka asks them what the item does, they essentially tell him that it will grant him his own harem. The nerds will employ the harem ray to address the fact that they haven't encountered a single harem in their nearly month-long presence. They go off on their journey, and although a harem raid sounds awesome, Haruka doesn't need one because he just wants to resume his life as a recluse. Unfortunately, one individual is preventing that from happening, and for some reason she is very angry. Haruka stops dead in his tracks and asks the class representative what's causing her ire. All of the girls yelled at him yesterday, but the class representative hasn't had a chance to yell at him directly yet. She ignores the fact that she was Tanaka's aim in the first place and starts screaming at Haruka for doing something so risky and not taking her with him. Haruka just apologizes to get this over with and agrees to inform her the next time he plans on risking his life. Class rep seems satisfied after he says this, so she turns and begins walking away, and Haruka is left on the floor wondering how things got to this point. If he doesn't figure something out soon, he's never going to be able to get back to his loner lifestyle in the woods, but that's when he comes up with an amazing idea. If he hits all the girls with a harem ray, they'll all like him too much to get mad at him, and if they won't get mad, he'll be free to leave. With that, he has made up his mind and plans to head into the dungeon today. At the same time, in the Lord's mansion, Mariel is a little worried because her father has been overworking himself recently. She tries to get him to relax with some tea, But he can't afford to relax just yet, as there have been several sightings of monsters in the area, and it is leading to fallen merchant activities all over the town. So as the Lord, he has to do something about it. Just then, a guard runs into the room, and he's got really bad news to deliver. A horde of monsters has just appeared near the dungeon. Coincidentally, Haruka happened to run into this horde of monsters, and while he wasn't expecting to have to fight anything before getting to the dungeon, he's always up for a quick warm-up. Of course, Mariel has no idea Haruka is already fighting the monsters, so she rushes over to the guild in a panic and tells the guild master that a huge horde of orcs is heading this way, and if nothing is done, it will surely destroy the entire town. Upon hearing this, the entire guild springs into action, and since class rep is there as well, she offers to help defend the town, so she rushes off to gather all her classmates. That's when she realizes that Haruka isn't here. As Haruka charges at the horde, he's a bit surprised to see so many of them, and there's even an orc king here too, but it's not like it makes much of a difference to him since he can still one-shot them all. Back in town, all the adventurers in the city assembled at the gate, expecting to have the fight of their lives, but all the monsters that were heading their way had already been dispatched, and Haruka had just finished wiping the Orc King off the face of the earth. Now that he's done with that, he takes a moment to think since it's pretty strange that this many orcs showed up at once. But at the same time, he doesn't really care, so he decides to forget about it and continues heading for the dungeon. He eventually locates the dungeon building and sneaks past the guard to get in without having any human interaction. Once he's inside, Haruka is amazed by how detailed the dungeon interior is, but he can't afford to let himself get distracted because he has a very important mission to complete. He begins looking for the harem ray, but he doesn't really know what it looks like, so he just wanders aimlessly until he comes across a random treasure chest in the middle of the hall. He's really excited and opens it, expecting to find some really cool items, but to his dismay, after using his appraisal skill to check their stats, he finds out that everything in the chest is a piece of junk. He keeps going through the dungeon and finds more stuff, but it's all just junk as well, so Haruka eventually gives up on trying to find the harem ray on his own and decides to ask that weird merchant if he knows anything about it. Once he gets back to town, everyone has been standing at the gate for hours now, waiting for the orcs to attack, and they are starting to think Mariel might have been lying, but all of a sudden, they see something coming from the smoke, so they grade their weapons, but it turns out that it's just Haruka, who's sleepy from a long day of adventuring. Haruka has no idea what's going on here or why everyone looks so tense, so class rep runs up to him and tells him about the horde of monsters that are heading for this village. She also asks him where he has been all this time, but Haruka can't exactly tell her that he's looking for a harem ray, so he just remains silent. Gatch asks Haruka if he saw any orcs on his way back here, and now that he mentions it, Haruka remembers slaughtering a horde of orcs earlier today, and for some reason, everyone is angry at him for it. Both the guild master and Mariel say they are thankful that he defeated the orcs, but they can't approve of him doing something as dangerous as fighting a horde of monsters by himself. The guild master tells him that there have been reports of increased monster activity, including monsters making their way out of the dungeon, so there's a serious possibility that they may experience a dungeon stampede in the near future, and that's why he wants Haruka to promise that he won't do anything reckless anymore. Once Haruka is back in his room, he thinks about everything that happened today, and now that he's got the guild master and Mariel on his case as well, it's going to be even harder for him to get out of town without someone nagging him about it. The next day, he heads over to the magic item merchant, and the guy is not happy to see Haruka at all after what he did last time. But Haruka assures him that he's not here for magic items today. All he wants to do is ask a question. He asks where he can find the harem ray, and while the merchant doesn't know of any harem rays, he does know about the re-ring that boosts your charisma. That sounds exactly like the kind of thing Haruka is looking for, so he asks the merchant where it's located. Since it's not anywhere on the first floor of the dungeon, the merchant tells him there's no way an item like that would be on the first floor to begin with because someone would have already picked it up. It must be somewhere around the 50th floor of the dungeon, which no one has ever explored. There are 100 floors in total, but it's not a simple task to descend these floors since you must defeat each floor boss as you go. There's still a lot of stuff that remains unknown about the dungeon, but if Haruka intends to go down there, the merchant tells him that he's going to have to stock up on potions and recovery items. So Haruka runs off to do just that, but all in all, the nerds are listening in on Haruka's conversation, and as soon as they learn that he's after the re-ring, They immediately go to class rep to snitch on Haruka. Once class rep finds out about the ring, she and the other girls get really worried because if Haruka ends up with something like that, they like him too much to say no to him, and then he'd be able to do whatever he wants, no matter what. They have to make sure Haruka doesn't get that ring, so they all set out to stop him. After stocking up on supplies, Haruka was on his way to the dungeon, but all of a sudden, his perception alerted him to the presence of several people behind him. So he turned around and found class rep and the entire class pulling up on him. He stops and asks class rep what everyone is doing here, but the class rep counters and asks him what he's doing here today. She tells him she knows he's after the ring, but Haruka denies it and nicks up a lie, saying he's actually after the tree ring, a ring that would allow him to talk to animals. Yeah, no one is buying that, and since he's not going to be able to convince them to leave him alone, he just makes a run for it. Class rep and the rest of the class follow him into the dungeon, and he may be ahead of them, but if class rep gets the freeze ray before him, she would be able to force Haruka to obey her rules, and that would be really bad for his loner lifestyle. So if he starts sprinting again to create more distance, class rep calls out to him and says it's dangerous to run in the dungeon since he may fall into a trap. But Haruka says traps won't work on him since his luck stat is maxed out. Traps may not work, but poor construction is another thing entirely, because when Haruka puts his hand on the wall, it collapses, sending him falling into a near-bottomless chasm. Class rep tries reaching her hand out to save him, but she's too late, so Haruka continues falling to his doom. He has been falling for a good minute so far, and I guess he forgot he has the airwalk skill because he doesn't know how to save himself. Eventually, he catches sight of the bottom of the pit, and that's when he comes up with an idea. So he uses earth magic to turn the ground into a cushion and break his fall. With how long he was falling, Haruka wondered if he somehow ended up on the 100th floor. It looked like there was only one path to follow, but he already knew that tunnel would lead him to the dungeon's final boss, and he didn't want to deal with that. So he starts thinking of ways to get out of here. He recalls that he has the airwalk skill and decides to use that to get out of here. But unfortunately, with how deep he fell, airwalk won't be able to get him out. He's got no choice left but to head down the ominous path, but on the bright side, falling into that trap and ending up in an unfamiliar part of the dungeon allowed him to unlock two new skills: trap detection and spatial awareness. He uses the skills to scope out the area, and thankfully there are no traps on the way to the boss's room, but he finds something even worse because it looks like he's actually on floor 101. So that means he has to fight the hidden boss, and that's going to be an extra hassle. Still, it's not like he has much of a choice in the matter, so he begins making his way through the hall. The mana in the air is so dense that he's having trouble breathing, but eventually he arrives at the boss's room and opens the door. As soon as he does this, a wave of mana rushes toward him, and he comes face to face with the secret boss of the dungeon, the Dungeon Emperor. He knows this is going to be a tough battle, so he uses his appraisal skill on it to see what he's up against, and to his horror, he discovers that the Dungeon Emperor is level 100. Meanwhile, class rep and the rest of the class have been descending the dungeon in search of Haruka, but they've already reached the 47th floor, and there's still no sign of him. The class is worried that he may have fallen to the bottom of the dungeon, but Shimazaki thinks Haruka could just use one of the portals that lead back up to the surface to escape. Unfortunately, Oda explains that the portal only appears after you clear the floor boss, and they don't show at all if you skip the normal path, so there's no chance of Haruka finding one. Everyone knows that Haruka is tough, but the legend of this dungeon says that the Dungeon Emperor lies at the bottom, and even the Dungeon King is nothing compared to the Dungeon Emperor. The girls are starting to worry that they might be ill-prepared to rescue Haruka, since they don't have the equipment needed for such a deep dungeon dive. But class rep doesn't want to leave him down there, so everyone decides to keep moving forward and make it down as far as they can. Meanwhile, down in the boss room, Haruka is weighing his options for fighting this thing. He appraised it, but he still couldn't see any of its skills, and the only info that shows up is the fact that this thing is the No-Life King. Haruka's leeches are extremely powerful when it comes to using magic, meaning he can afford to get into a ranged attack battle. So instead, he decides to attack it up close. He flash steps behind the Lich, and he thinks he has the upper hand, but at the last second, the Lich counters him with its sword. So this fight isn't going to be as easy as Haruka thought it would be. Dark clouds are gathering over the dungeon, and Mariel and her fathers know that something terrible is about to happen. In order to prepare for any potential emergencies, her father instructs her to go to the guild. Haruka is still trying to figure out how to outpace the Dungeon Emperor's superhuman speed. To get the advantage, he chooses to employ all of his speed-boosting skills at once. He and the Emperor begin rushing across the chamber in darts, but he is still a step too slow when he hits. He must therefore attempt to go even more quickly. He continues to hit the Emperor, honing his moves along the way, but nothing he has tried has given him the upper hand thus far. Additionally, he is barely escaping the Emperor's fatal blows, so the fierce combat prevents him from continuing for very long. Haruka can now see glimpses of the future, since her contact lenses have given her a new capacity for foresight. However, despite the foresight warning, Haruka will perish if he lets his guard down for even a moment. He doesn't have many options here, so if he resolves to just keep attacking like his life depends on it, because it does. After the fight has dragged on for quite a while, Haruka is starting to have fun. But at the same time, his body is not having fun because his knees give out, and he starts panting heavily. All this fighting has completely drained his stamina and magic reserves, so he's on the verge of losing consciousness. Meanwhile, the Dungeon Emperor looks like it's just getting started. Haruka forces himself to get back on his feet, but he can barely move, so if the Emperor attacks him now, he's done for. Only the Emperor isn't actually attacking him anymore. Haruka knew from the start the Dungeon Emperor was no ordinary monster, but now that he thinks about it, doesn't sense any bloodlust coming from it, not even a little bit. That means this thing hasn't been taking the fight seriously this entire time, and Haruka takes offense to that. So it gets up and charges at the Emperor one more time, but he is still outclassed in speed and ends up with a sword to his neck. The Dungeon Emperor could have killed him right there, but it didn't, and Haruka doesn't understand why it doesn't want to finish him off. Just then, Haruka notices that there's a lot of miasma swirling around the Dungeon Emperor, and it looks pretty sinister. So there's a possibility that the Dungeon Emperor is being forced to fight by the miasma. As he realizes this, his staff begins glowing and absorbing the miasma. So while Haruka has no idea why the hell his staff has the ability to do this, he just goes with it and begins attacking to absorb all the miasma. After a couple of swings, he manages to take out the concentration of miasma, and after it has all been absorbed, the Dungeon Emperor lowers its sword and just stands there. It looks like Haruka was right about it being forced to fight, and now he understands that the Dungeon Emperor has been looking for someone to put an end to its life, so it would be free from the control of the miasma. That's why it didn't finish Haruka off when it had the chance, because it hoped Haruka would be the one to put an end to its suffering. Even though Haruka got rid of the miasma control in the Emperor, there's still a ton of ambient miasma in the area, so sooner or later, the Emperor is going to end up under the control of the darkness again. So Haruka needs to do something before that happens. At first, he considers killing the Emperor to get it over with, but he couldn't bring himself to do it, so he just hugs the Emperor instead because of all the pain she's had to go through. Coincidentally, this activates Haruka's subjugation skill, so the Emperor gets subjugated. While he didn't intend for this to happen, it works out great because the Emperor can't be controlled by the darkness if she's being controlled by Haruka. Haruka can't tell what the Emperor thinks of the current situation, so he asks if she is mad that he subjugated her, but she shakes her head to tell him she's fine with it. Haruka is relieved to hear that, and this also confirms that she can understand him, so there shouldn't be much trouble communicating with her since they are on friendly terms now. Haruka decides to check the Emperor's stats to see if anything has changed, and takes a surprise, for her level got reset to level 1, which must be a side effect of the subjugation. In addition, he can now see the Emperor's name, so he finds out that she is called Angelica, and he starts freaking out because it just dawned on him that the Emperor is a girl. So class rep is going to yell at him again if she finds out he subjugated her. There's no point in worrying about that right now, so Haruka asks Angelica if she would like to get out of there with him, and she agrees. So the two of them head through the door and arrive on the 100th floor of the dungeon. Haruka used his spatial awareness skills to scan the area, and he located a staircase at the edge of the room which should lead out of there. But as he and Angelica enter the room, they cause the 4 bosses to spawn. Haruka is terrified because not only is he exhausted from his fight with Angelica, but the only reason he survived that fight was because Angelica wasn't trying to kill him. But this level 100 living armor boss definitely has murder on his mind. Haruka would really like to get to the staircase without having to fight, but then he comes up with an idea to avoid the boss altogether. He prepares his earth magic and uses it on the ceiling to cause it to collapse. He was planning to use airwalk to climb through the hole, but then he notices two Minotaur giving him a death glare just to make sure he knows what he's getting into. He appraises the monsters, and he is mortified to find out that they are level 99. It looks like he just made matters worse for himself because the Minotaur jumped down to attack him as well, but luckily they end up landing right on top of the living armor, so all three monsters lose a ton of HP, and Haruka seizes the opportunity to finish them off. And while he's picking up the magic crystals, he notices that Angelica is looking at the leftover armor the monsters dropped, so he tells her she can have it if she wants. Angelica excitedly puts the armor on, but it's a little too bulky for her, so Haruka doesn't think it's going to be a good fit. However, the armor suddenly begins to glow and changes its form to fit Angelica perfectly. Haruka is relieved that it fits her so well since she won't have her naked bones exposed anymore, but he is a little concerned since it's a set of magic armor they found in the dungeon. So he says he's going to appraise it to make sure it's safe, and let's just say the armor is not safe at all. It has the curse of Bing on it, so now that Angelica has it on, she's never going to be able to take it off. Angelica gets mad that Haruka didn't warn her about this earlier, but she was already a skeleton, so it's not like she had many options for clothes anyway. Meanwhile, on the 50th floor, Haruka's classmates are still desperately looking for him. Everyone else thinks this is pointless since Hiro will probably just show up on his own and say something like he cleared the entire dungeon by himself. And while that definitely sounds like something he would do, class rep doesn't want to sit around and do nothing, so she leads everyone to the boss's room so they can keep searching for him. But as soon as she opens it, they're all horrified to come face to face with a giant cyclops as the four bosses back in the city. Marielle arrives at the guild and informs the guild master that something strange is going on in the dungeon. And while she's not sure what it is, she has worried things might get out of hand. The guild master says he hasn't received any reports from the guard he's stationed at the dungeon entrance, but Gak reminds him that the guard that's stationed there has a room temperature IQ, so they can't really trust him to report anything important. They had better get themselves ready just in case something actually does happen. After says he's going to go tell the guild members to prepare themselves. Speaking of preparing, the guild master asks where that group of new adventurers is since they would be really useful right now. Neither After nor Gach has seen any of the classmates today, and it's normal for Haruka to disappear all the time. But if all the others are gone too, maybe something really is going on down on floor 98. Haruka finally gets Angelica to cheer up by giving her a cape to make her armor look nicer, but all of a sudden, he senses a monster nearby, so he uses his appraisal to try and figure out what it is. He discovers that the monster is a lich, and liches are immune to all physical attacks. So the only thing that would work on it is holy magic, and Haruka doesn't know how to use holy magic. He contemplates trying to open a hole in the roof to get out of here without having to fight the lich, but he doesn't know what crazy monster might fall through, so he can't risk doing that again. He may not have holy magic, but his staff seemed pretty effective against the miasma, so Haruka tries his luck and pokes the lich with it until it eventually disappears. He still doesn't understand how it works, but a win is a win. He and Angelica continue climbing, and when they get to the 97th floor, they come face to face with a bunch of venomous moth monsters. Haruka doesn't want to fight the moths directly because the venom will probably kill him, so he decides to play it smart and creates a giant fireball to lure all the moths in before burning them to ash with it. They then move up to the 95th floor, and this time, they are faced with venomous caterpillars that spew really sticky string. Getting through here without getting stuck to the string on the floor would be really difficult normally, but Haruka just decides to use earth magic to roll up the floor and squash all the caterpillars in the process. Things have been going well so far, but when Haruka and Angelica arrive on the 95th floor, something is clearly different compared to the other floors. They are suddenly attacked by the boss of this floor, and it's a living sword, but for some reason, it's level 100 instead of 95. The sword tries to slash Haruka, but Haruka dodges out of the way and sneaks up behind it to counterattack. Unfortunately, the sword spots him before he can land a hit and moves out of the way, so Haruka is going to have to think of something else to stop it. The sword is moving in ways no humanoid could ever match, and to make it worse, it's even got helper swords that can attack Haruka from all directions, so there's no way he could even keep up with this thing. Just as he says this, he realizes that there's someone here who is fast enough to keep up with the sword monster, so he calls over to Angelica and asks her to tag in real quick. Angelica is more than happy to help, so she pulls out her sword and starts getting serious so she can take this thing down. The sword monster realizes that it's in deep trouble now, so it gets all its helper swords in formation and tries to block Angelica's attack. But as she charges at it, she easily slices it in half with one swing. Haruka is shocked that Angelica is still so strong, since bosses usually get downgraded when they become allies, but with their combined strength, he's sure the two of them will be able to get out of this dungeon in no time. Meanwhile, on the 50th floor, Haruka's classmates are fighting for their lives against the Cyclops, and they are losing. Several of them have already been injured, so if they take another hit from that thing, they are going to be done for. The guys are all wondering what Haruka would do in a situation like this, and it's not like he has ever given them good advice, but they know Haruka would never give up in a situation like this. So Kazaki and Oda come up with a plan together that might work. They pick the class rep off the ground and fill her in on the details, but she's against the idea since it's way too dangerous. However, they don't have many options, so class rep ends up agreeing, and Kazaki takes his position on the front lines to face the Cyclops. The Cyclops may be powerful, but it's slow, so Kazaki thinks his acceleration skills should allow him to outpace it long enough to land a blow on its head. The girls in the class provide cover fire to keep the Cyclops distracted while Kazaki approaches, but just as he was about to enter striking range, the Cyclops uses its other hand to swat Kazaki away like a bug. He's really disappointed in himself for failing to land a single hit on the Cyclops, but it's fine since this was all part of the plan. He was just a decoy to keep the Cyclops distracted while Oda got his attack ready, and once Kazaki was out of the way, Oda used his ability to snipe the Cyclops through the eye. Meanwhile, Haruka and Angelica have just made it to the 85th floor, and the boss fights are getting a lot easier, but all of a sudden they feel a tremor throughout the dungeon, and it seems like a dungeon stampede might be on the horizon. The second wave of monsters is getting closer and closer to the city of Omu, and the adventurers gathered outside the city walls are doing everything they can to stop the monsters from getting in. The situation looks very bad, and it feels almost impossible to stop the monsters with the small force they have. Despite this, the guild master stands strong and tells everyone to give their best effort, reminding them that they have to protect their city no matter what. Meanwhile, deep inside the dungeon below the city, Haruka realizes there isn't much time left. If they don't hurry, the city could be destroyed. He looks at Angelica and asks her urgently if they can move faster. He knows they need to speed up and finish their climb as quickly as possible to get out of the dungeon and back to the city. Angelica doesn't mind, so the two start running to clear the remaining floors as quickly as possible. They soon arrive on the 73rd floor and are faced with two lizardmen, but without even stopping, Haruka recalls that reptiles are weak to cold, so he casts some ice magic to freeze them in place and has Angelica smash them to pieces. The next floor has a bunch of scorpions inside, but Haruka just uses a bunch of smoke to disorient them so Angelica can land a finishing blow. The following floor has a giant hellhound as its boss, and Haruka doesn't really have any convenient magic to deal with it, so instead, he throws a stink bomb straight into the dog's nose, which serves as enough of a distraction for Angelica to take it out. After the hellhound is taken care of, Haruka takes a moment to organize all the loot they've been gathering so far, and he thinks it might be a good idea to just combine everything together since it might help them get through the dungeon quicker. Although he's a little disappointed that he still hasn't found the rare ring he came down here for in the first place, he notices that Angelica looks a bit concerned by what he's doing. So he tells her there's something he wants to try when they get back to town, but that's not what she was concerned about. She notices that Haruka might be trying too hard and feels like he needs to take a break. Even though Haruka is tired, he knows he can't rest now. Together, they make their way up to the 69th floor, which looks like a forest. However, there's no sign of the boss yet. Suddenly, an owl lands on a branch nearby. Haruka uses his appraising ability and learns that this owl is the boss of the floor. The owl is called a sleep owl, which means it probably has some power related to sleep. Before Haruka can prepare for the owl's abilities, its eyes start glowing. The owl tries to use its power to make Haruka fall asleep. Haruka tells class rep that he probably wouldn't have been able to get out of this situation normally, but with a little bit of luck and some clever thinking, even someone like him can survive. While later, Haruka wakes up and finds Angelica carrying him on her back while he was asleep. She took out the sleep owl and picked him up so they could keep going. But even though Haruka is awake now, she tells him he should rest a little while she carries him. Meanwhile, back with Haruka's classmates, they were trying to clear a few extra floors so they could get to Haruka sooner. But then they ran into this level 100 Sphinx, and they are severely outmatched by it. None of their attacks do any significant damage, and whatever minor damage they manage to inflict is instantly healed. After tells them that attacking this thing is pointless because he has read about it before, and dungeon sphinxes can only be defeated by solving a puzzle. It's also immune to all kinds of attacks, making it pretty much immortal. So unless one of them is smart enough to figure out what the puzzle is, they are doomed. Haruka and Angelica have just made it to floor 59. And since Angelica has been carrying him most of the way up, Haruka feels really refreshed right now. But all of a sudden, his perception skill alerts him to something happening on the upper floor. He knows it can't be good, so he rushes up as quickly as possible. Up on the 57th floor, Haruka's classmates are on the verge of giving up because there's no way for them to defeat this thing. All their magical and physical attacks are useless against it. And they don't even know what puzzle they would have to solve to beat it, so it's hopeless. While despairing over their current situation, Class Rep loses track of the Sphinx, and by the time she realizes what's happening, it's about to stomp on her. Luckily, before Class Rep could be hurt, Haruka shows up, and he has already appraised the Sphinx, so he knows all about its immunity to attack damage. However, while Haruka was on his way down here, one of the items he picked up grants him the ability to negate all defenses, and that includes damage immunity. So, after Haruka hits the Sphinx to disable its defense, Angelica jumps in and finishes it off by slashing its head. Now that the Sphinx is defeated and everyone is safe, Haruka lands on the floor and greets the group, saying he's finally back. Everyone is happy to see him because without Haruka, they would be in serious trouble. However, Class Rep is a little curious about the Lady Knight standing next to him. Hera is about to explain what happened while Haruka was stuck at the bottom of the dungeon, but just as she begins, the floor suddenly cracks open beneath his feet. He almost falls all the way back down to the bottom. Luckily, after the first time this happened, Haruka became more careful and jumps back up using the falling rubble, returning to the floor safely. He reassures the group that they don't need to worry because he won't fall for the same trick again, but just as he says that, the floor gives way a third time. This time, Haruka isn't ready for it, and he ends up really falling down. However, Class Rep refuses to let that happen, so she jumps after Haruka to catch him before he falls. She has learned from her previous failure as well, so this time she doesn't miss Haruka's hand and manages to pull him up in time. Everyone is relieved that Haruka didn't fall all the way down into the labyrinth again, but they don't have much time to celebrate because the next wave of the stampede is already on its way, and it's absolutely massive compared to the previous ones. If a wave of this size makes it to Omi, then there's no chance of the city surviving. Class Rep turns to Haruka and asks him if he really has a plan to stop all these monsters. Haruka confirms that he knows a way to stop the monsters and says Angelica is the key. However, they don't have enough time for Haruka to explain the entire plan, so he tells everyone to head for the teleportation gate so they can get back to Omu as soon as possible. While they are running for the gate, Class Rep asks Haruka how he managed to defeat all those powerful monsters and make it up here. Haruka tells Class Rep that he probably couldn't have made it out of the situation through normal means, but with some luck and clever thinking, even someone like him can survive. After some time, the group finally returns to Omu and spots Gaitek and the guild master sitting on a hill outside the city. They are happy to see the reinforcements have arrived, but Mariel quickly draws their attention to the massive horde of monsters approaching. It's not just a large number, it's an overwhelming force that even Haruka knows he can't take on. The guild master's hope disappears instantly when he sees the size of the horde. The entire city trembles from the heavy footsteps of the approaching monsters, and the Lord of Omi is doing his best to keep everyone calm, especially those hiding in the church. He reassures them, saying that he believes the adventurers will save the city. However, outside the city, the adventurers are nearly defeated by the sheer size of the stampede, feeling like it's just too much to handle. Haruka returns to Angelica and reminds her to do what they had planned. She steps forward, draws her sword, and plunges it into the ground. A huge surge of energy starts pouring out from the sword. Haruka explains that while Angelica may not be the same as when he fought her in the dungeon, she is still the Dungeon Emperor. This means she holds complete control over all the monsters from that dungeon. As the Dungeon Emperor, she has the power to make all those monsters disappear. With a powerful wave of energy, the monsters begin vanishing one by one until there are none left. Once the crisis has been averted, Haruka walks up to Angelica to congratulate her with a celebratory fist bump. It is a relief that all the monsters are gone, but all of Haruka's classmates are extremely confused and ask him how he did it. Haruka explains that he didn't actually do anything here, so the one they should be thanking is Angelica. When Haruka says this, Oda from the nerds quickly figures out that Angelica must be the Dungeon Emperor. Everyone starts asking if that means Angelica is a monster, but Haruka reassures them that there's no need to worry. He explains that he spent a lot of time with her in the dungeon and knows she's a kind person, so she won't hurt anyone. Although they still find it hard to believe, they trust Haruka's word and decide to calm down. However, Oda still has some doubts. He points out that, based on what he's read, the Dungeon Emperor is supposed to be the most powerful being inside the dungeon, and he's curious about what that means for Angelica. Haruka calls Oda creepy for knowing so much random information, but he's right about Angelica being the strongest in the dungeon. In fact, even after her level got reset, she is still incredibly broken as a fighter. She was able to overpower all the monsters they fought in the dungeon, so Haruka figured she could probably use that power to command the monsters and get rid of them. Although what Angelica did only works on monsters from her dungeon, and they all have to be relatively close to her for it to work, so she wouldn't be able to stop an attack from a different dungeon if another stampede occurred at some point. While they are on the topic of what Angelica did, the girls ask if Angelica vaporized the monsters, but Haruka clarifies that the monsters are all still alive. All Angelica did was teleport them back and issue an order for them to stay inside the dungeon. Since it was the Dungeon Emperor that gave the order, Haruka is sure the monsters won't be coming out anytime soon, and that means that the city of Omi will remain safe for the foreseeable future. So everything can go back to normal now. The next day, Haruka comes up with a good idea on how to use all the equipment he got from the dungeon. So he spends some time organizing his inventory and asks class rep to gather all their classmates. Once everyone arrives, they all see a bunch of treasure laid out on the tables in front of them, and it's all super rare and valuable, so they are really excited. Haruka then announces that he is holding a super special sale for them, so they are free to pick out whatever they want, but they will still have to pay him for it. Though both the boys and girls are ready to compete with each other for the best items, once the sale actually begins, the girls go crazy with Black Friday fever and turn the sale into a battlefield. A bunch of the guys are too scared to go anywhere near them at this point, and Haruka feels a little bad for them, so he offers a special deal and pulls out a bunch of extra equipment he wasn't planning on selling. After a while, everyone has bought everything they wanted, and they all look happy with their purchases, which makes Haruka feel satisfied. The new gear should help keep his classmates safe, so now the only thing on Haruka's mind is what to do with Angelica. She'll be stuck in town with everyone for a while, and after spending so many years alone in the dungeon, Haruka worries she might not be used to socializing. He's especially concerned that she might not get along with the other girls. Meanwhile, Haruka's classmates are still excited about the amazing loot they've gotten, and Haruka feels just as happy because he made a lot of money selling the items. As he counts his money, class rep walks up to him, and he quickly hides it. Turning to her and asking what she needs, class rep tells him she wants him to properly introduce her to Angelica and explain how he became friends with her. Since Angelica is the Dungeon Emperor, class rep thinks Haruka must have used the ring to make her like him. Haruka tells her, however, that he never actually found the ring. He admits that it was actually his subjugate skill that turned Angelica into his companion. But then class rep starts yelling at him for using his subjugate skill on another girl. She demands to know how this happened, but Haruka doesn't really have an explanation to give. So instead, class rep decides to ask Angelica for the details and drags her off. Haruka is glad he doesn't have to deal with class rep this time, but he's also worried if Angelica will be alright talking with her alone. Class rep gathers all the girls in one room so they can all listen to Angelica's story, but it's pretty awkward since Angelica hasn't said a word yet. Even so, the girls are still eager to learn about her, so class rep goes up to Angelica and asks her if she can tell them about herself, even if it's little by little. The girls eventually learn that Angelica was trapped in the deepest parts of the dungeon, but Haruka rescued her. Instead of killing her, Haruka used his subjugate skill to break the curse that had kept her trapped in the dungeon. After hearing all of this, class rep decides she should do something nice for Angelica, so she invites her to join everyone for a bath. At this point, everyone still thinks Angelica is a skeleton. As they start helping her take off her armor, they are completely shocked to see not skeleton bones, but healthy, strong thighs. Meanwhile, back in Haruka's room, he is glad to finally be able to sleep in his own bed again, but he feels a little disappointed because he never found the ring. On the bright side, his time in the dungeon helped him level up 6 times and gain some great new skills. However, even with his stronger stats, he knows he could never have stopped the stampede without Angelica and the others helping him. If he truly wants to live the life of a loner, then he has to be strong enough to fight on his own without relying on help from others. So he thinks it's about time that he heads back into the woods. The next morning, instead of sneaking out of the city, Haruka decides to ask class rep if she's okay with him leaving for a while. Class rep doesn't seem to mind, saying there's nothing too serious going on in town at the moment. However, she has something else on her mind. After seeing what happened yesterday, she realizes that Angelica is back to normal, and she can't help but think that Angelica is actually pretty attractive. This makes class rep a little worried that Angelica might steal Haruka away from her. Meanwhile, Haruka turns to Angelica and asks if she wants to join him since he's heading into the woods. Angelica happily agrees. A little later, Haruka and Angelica arrive in the woods, and Haruka enjoys the fresh breeze, feeling happy to be back in nature after such a long time. Since they're out here, Haruka wants to practice a little with his new gear shift skill, so he asks Angelica if she thinks she can keep up with him, and Angelica nods in agreement. Haruka takes off running and practically teleports from one spot to another, but the incredible speed is still pretty hard for him to control, so he accidentally ends up falling off the side of a cliff. Thanks to all the falls he took in the dungeon, Haruka has learned to always be ready, so when the ground gives way, he lands safely on his feet. Angelica quickly catches up to him and peeks over the edge of the cliff to check if Haruka is okay. However, she doesn't see the slippery mushrooms near the edge, and she ends up slipping and falling off the cliff too. Luckily, Haruka is able to catch her just in time. He's relieved that Angelica is okay, but he's surprised by how heavy she is, especially since he thought she was a skeleton. Angelica, on the other hand, is completely embarrassed, feeling mortified as Haruka holds her in his arms. Later that night, Haruka brings Angelica back to his house and heads to the bathroom to enjoy a nice relaxing soak in the tub. He even jokingly offers to let Angelica join him in there, but Angelica doesn't realize the offer was a joke, so she takes him up on his offer and walks into the bathroom. Haruka is surprised that Angelica actually wants to take a bath with him, and he's even more shocked when he sees a beautiful blonde girl standing there instead of a skeleton. He stands up, completely forgetting that he's not wearing a towel, and asks if the girl is really the same Angelica he knows. Angelica confirms it, so Haruka gets out of the bath and says they need to talk. The two of them both take a seat on Haruka's bed, and Haruka has a lot of questions to ask, but first he wants to know if Angelica can talk now since she's human again. Angelica does have vocal cords, but she hasn't talked for so long that she doesn't remember how to, so instead, she uses various hand signs to explain how she ended up like this. As the Dungeon Emperor, Angelica was reduced to nothing but a skeleton, but she put on that living armor. It had a curse that made it bind to the user's flesh, so the armor restored Angelica's flesh on a technicality. Then Haruka gave her a blessed bangle, which negated the armor's curse of binding. Additionally, the necromancy jewel and the ring of fortune restored her life force and autonomy. So all these overlapping effects turned her back into a regular human. Haruka is basically responsible for returning her humanity. So Angelica has been helping him as her way of saying thanks. Haruka appreciates the fact that she wants to repay him, but he feels like he might be robbing her of her freedom like this, so he tells her she doesn't need to stick around him anymore if she doesn't want to. He wants her to know that she's free to do whatever she wants, but Angelica refuses to leave Haruka's side because what she wants is to stay with him. Haruka realizes that Angelica doesn't want to be alone, so he decides to stay with her a little longer. To cheer her up, he asks if she wants to hear a fun story. From there, Haruka spent the entire night yapping about whatever came to mind, and Angelica really enjoyed listening to him. The next morning, Haruka and Angelica head out, and Haruka asks Angelica if she would like to have a little training match with him. Angelica isn't opposed to the idea, but she wonders why he suddenly wants to fight. So Haruka explains that he has been working on a new skill recently, and he wants to test it out to see how much he has improved over the last couple of days. Angelica agrees to help him practice, so the two of them face off against each other. Haruka already knows Angelica was holding back against him when they fought in the dungeon, so now that he asked her to go all out against him, he's sure she will be a lot faster than before. Haruka and Angelica spar. Angelica, with her incredible speed, charges forward. Haruka uses his new skill, Gear Shift, to dodge her attacks. He distances himself and prepares to counterattack. But Angelica is too quick. She blocks his strike and hits him on the head. Haruka falls, defeated. Angelica checks on him, and he assures her he's okay. He might have lost this time, but he's learning to use gearshift better. He's confident he'll be faster than her one day, but for now, all this training has really worked up his appetite. So Haruka asks Angelica if she wants to get something to eat with him. Angelica nods in agreement, so he takes her down to the river and shows her how he catches fish with his lightning skill. After gathering all the fish, he puts them in a basket, and the two start walking home so they can prepare it. But Haruka is getting sick of grilling the fish all the time, so he suggests they should make a hot pot instead. When they get home, Haruka starts working in the kitchen, and Angelica wants to help too. But she has never used a kitchen knife before, so Haruka gets behind her to give her some guidance, and Angelica seems to be enjoying it since she gets to spend quality time with Haruka. Once the meal is finally ready, it looks amazing, so Haruka and Angelica dig in. After they are both done eating, Haruka is absolutely stuffed. Angelica seems a bit nervous, so Haruka asks her if something is bothering her. Too embarrassed to speak, Angelica grabs Haruka's hand and pulls him to the bedroom, asking him to sit next to her. Haruka is still unsure of what's going on, but he follows her request and sits down. However, Angelica moves closer and positions herself behind him, which leaves Haruka wondering what she wants. He quickly rules out one possibility, realizing Angelica is too innocent for that, so he guesses she just wants to give him a normal massage. Angelica confirms this, saying she wants to thank him for everything he's done for her. Since she's trying to be kind, Haruka agrees to let her give him a massage. Unfortunately, Angelica is terrible at it. With every touch, Haruka hears his bones crack, and not in a good way. But Angelica is trying her best, so he pretends that she did a really good job. Even though she already gave Haruka a massage, Angelica still feels like doing something else for him, so she asks if there's anything Haruka wants. Since she is offering, Haruka asks her to come outside with him for a bit. Outside, the two of them sit on a bench to look up at the stars. But Angelica is feeling a little embarrassed, so she's keeping her distance from Haruka. He tells her she doesn't have to sit so far away from him and gives her a head pat, but that just makes her even more embarrassed, so she backs away from him. She wants to convey her feelings to him properly, so she tries her best to say the words, but she's still having trouble speaking, so she turns away in shame. Haruka tells her she doesn't have to push herself so hard because he knows she's trying her best to make progress. But if Angelica is going to improve her communication skills, Haruka can't drag her into his loner lifestyle. The next day, Haruka suggests they should head back to the city. As they walk back together, it suddenly starts raining. Without thinking, Haruka grabs Angelica's hand and pulls her along so they can run through the rain before they get soaked. When they finally make it back to town, the girls are all excited to see them again. However, they're even more thrilled about Haruka and Angelica's relationship because the two are clearly holding hands. Haruka and Angelica quickly realize what they're doing and both become embarrassed, letting go of each other's hands. But by then, it's already too late because all the girls have already noticed. So they all swarm around Angelica and start asking all kinds of details about the time she spent with Haruka. Angelica is a little overwhelmed, so class rep blows her whistle to break it up and officially welcomes Angelica back. Haruka thanks class rep for looking after Angelica and says he will be counting on her from now on. But while Angelica may not be getting hounded anymore, the guys start hassling Haruka and asking him for all the details of his date with Angelica. Haruka yells at the boys to leave him alone. Angelica approaches him, looking nervous. She says her first word, a simple thank you for all he's done. Haruka is proud of her. He realizes everyone faces their own challenges, making them all loners in a way, but they have each other. With this thought, Haruka feels at peace. He can now focus on mastering this world, alone but not lonely.